Thank you very much, Amber. I will now call the meeting of the University Senate to order. Our second item concerns administrative responses to the University Senate actions and is presented for information purposes. Item number 3 is a list of recent faculty and staff and student deaths that have been sent for announcement to the Senate. I invite you to observe a moment of silence while I read the names. And there is faculty and staff: Diane Arney, Kelly Cullen, Rachel Sherman, Theodore Wilson. There are no student deaths reported. Item number 4 is approval of the minutes from the University Senate meeting on March 28, 2024. Amber, please go ahead with the poll.
Couple more seconds. And last call. With 94 ayes and 0 nays, that motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is my report. I will note that we're gathered for the final University Senate meeting of the academic year, and of course, my last meeting with you. With the semester, while the semester may be starting to wind down, there is a lot happening at the university and a lot happening elsewhere affecting the university. So I'll dive right into a few updates. On the legislative side in St. Paul, the Minnesota State Legislature is in its final month. Last Friday marked the third legislative deadline, which means that all bills with an appropriation had to pass out of their respective budget committees. Exceptions to this are the omnibus tax bill and the omnibus capital investment bill, the latter of which will contain the university's request for HEAPR funding. Also, language related to a study on Minnesota's healthcare landscape, including the university's academic health programs, is still in play within the House and Senate HHS budgets. Last week, the Senate and House Higher Education committees passed their omnibus funding bills. Unfortunately, from our perspective, neither bill contained funds for either our $45 million core mission support or our $80 million academic health support request. Many of you have been following the legislation related to PELRA, the Public Employment Relations Act. Over the past few weeks, the administration and other members of the university community have provided oral and written testimony to several committees at the legislature. The administration agrees that a review of PELRA is due, given changes that have taken place over time in the overall work environment and the needs of the university. We believe it's important that any changes support the rights of our employees to unionize, while at the same time not inadvertently create unnecessary confusion that detracts from our ability to fulfill our mission of teaching, research, or outreach. We have asked for additional time to allow us to engage in the normal and robust consultative process with our employees and our shared governance partners, those who would be directly impacted by these changes. Our preference would be for the bill to be held over until the next legislative session to allow for this meaningful impact. But we recognize we don't control the process, and if the bill is passed in this legislative session, we will begin to lay the groundwork to move forward with a new PELRA structure. On the federal side, early last week, I was in Washington, D.C. for AAU meetings, and on Tuesday, I traveled to Capitol Hill with Melissa Lopez Franzen and Amy Kircher to meet with members of the Minnesota congressional delegation. We met with Representative Brad Finstead, Representative Betty McCollum, Representative Ilhan Omar, Senator Amy Klobuchar, and Senator Tina Smith. We thank the delegation for supporting the university's appropriation requests and partnerships, which are very much focused in research when it comes to the federal side. And we also laid the foundation for future in-district meetings with President-designate Cunningham. Turning to updates closer at home, public safety is always top of mind. Creating the safest possible environment for our students, faculty, staff, and visitors system-wide has been one of my top priorities for the past year. I'm encouraged by the progress we've made and immensely grateful to all those who have worked tirelessly, including lots of overtime, to try to ensure a safe environment. System-wide, our various teams have been dedicated to this issue. We have utilized the one-time financial support provided by the legislature last session for enhancements on each of our campuses. And while we're working to implement the initiatives I just mentioned, such as assisting on 911 calls in a defined area and creating a Dinkytown Safety Center, we continue to work on other things as well. The incidents like last week's armed assaults on U of M students off campus show that, however, no matter how much effort we put toward public safety, we continue to be faced with outside challenges. We understand that these alarm our students, their families, and our greater community, and they're a reminder that our safety efforts can never cease. We'll continue to do all we can to minimize any recurrences of the types of these reprehensible activities. I'd also like to address the protests that have happened this week in particular on the East Bank. Our Department of Public Safety received reports that a group had established an encampment in the pre-dawn hours on the north end of the Northrop Mall on Tuesday. UMPD arrived shortly after 6 a.m. and informed those present that the encampment was in violation of both the university policy and state trespassing law. Tents are not allowed on any university property for any purpose without a permit. In addition, public safety has not allowed any encampments, tents, fires, or other types of encampment living arrangements on any university properties or in the buildings. It really doesn't matter what side of an issue you're on. It doesn't matter which issue it is. It also has extended to we've not allowed homeless shelters either. The group was asked to disperse by 7 a.m. and told that they would be arrested if they chose to stay beyond that time and would not allow our police to dismantle the tents. Some of those present chose to disperse and continue peacefully protesting, but 9 chose to remain and were arrested without incident. I do want to clarify that the standard civil trespass warnings about being banned from campus for years should not have been applied to university students or employees, and those have been rescinded. Later on Tuesday afternoon, a few hundred people gathered for a peaceful protest outside Kaufman Union. The gathering again included tents and other encampment structures. This time, these structures were taken down by the participants upon request by UMPD, and the event ended with no arrests. And yesterday, there were some further gatherings and demonstrations, but no encampments, and there were no arrests. And as we speak today, there's more activity on campus. As a public research university, demonstrations where groups express diverse views and opinions occur regularly on our campus, and we support the right of all members of our university community to speak and demonstrate peacefully. I'm happy to take questions about anything related to these events over the last couple of days at the end of my remarks, but I do have a few other things to cover if I could before that. The Board of Regents has a robust agenda for its meetings on May 9th and 10th, and it includes the review of our recommended fiscal year 2025 annual operating budget. Over the course of this past year, the administration has been working diligently to develop this annual operating budget recommendation. This is no small feat, with the university's annual operating budget being over $4 billion and reaching into every aspect of our multi-campus system. The budget recommendation will be published in the docket materials on the board's website next Friday afternoon, May 3rd. Along with that, the opportunity to provide feedback begins. As in years past, the board will welcome input through their online portal. Video, audio, and written comments may be submitted there. And additionally, there will be an in-person forum on Friday, May the 10th at 8 a.m. in the boardroom. The board will formally review and discuss the recommendations at the Finance and Operations Committee meeting next Thursday afternoon. Regents will act on the proposed budget during their June meeting. More information about the budget process and providing feedback will be published in the brief in weeks ahead. I'd like to provide an update on the search for the university's next Senior Vice President for Finance and Operations. I'm grateful to Provost Croson and Vice President for Human Resources Ken Horstman, who are serving as co-chairs of the search committee. The committee also includes broad representation of faculty, staff, students, and alumni system-wide. The search committee held their first meeting earlier this month and hosted a series of virtual listening sessions where they gathered input from the community that will inform the position profile. The committee and I will be supported by our search partners from the firm Isaacson Miller, who will be instrumental in recruiting a broad and diverse candidate pool. Comprehensive candidate recruitment will get underway very soon, with first round interviews planned for later this spring and interviews with finalists in the coming months. And as was true with the UMD Chancellor search, incoming President Rebecca Cunningham, although not here full time yet, does plan to set aside time so that she can be part of this process. It will clearly be an important new member of her team going forward, and so I'm grateful for her participation. Speaking of Dr. Cunningham, I continue to be in touch with her as she starts the transition to the University of Minnesota. She spent a few days on campus earlier this month and will be here again during Regents Week early in May. And I can attest to her enthusiasm to begin leading the university, and I think she'll definitely hit the ground running. A hallmark of the spring is that we have many occasions to celebrate our students, staff, and faculty at commencements and also at various award ceremonies. I will be participating in commencement ceremonies for the medical school, CFANS, and the Carlson School here on the Twin Cities campus. I am also honored to be giving a keynote address for commencement at the University of Minnesota Morris. Already, I've had the chance to partake in the Distinguished Teacher Award ceremony, the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux Community Graduation event, and the ceremony for recipients of the President's Student Leadership and Service Awards. In June, I'll be at the ceremony for recipients of the President's Award for Outstanding Service. These are joyous, uplifting occasions celebrating some of our very finest on our campuses, and being part of these celebrations has been and will continue to be among the highlights of my time as interim president. They reaffirm for me what a special place the University of Minnesota is, and more importantly, highlights the people that make it shine. As I mentioned at the outset, this is my last University Senate meeting. Heading into this role, I'll admit I knew very little about the University Senate and the U of M's method of shared governance. The shared governance model has been of tremendous value for me, given my more limited background on the academic side of things. Getting this input in these settings from faculty, staff, and students has really been a blessing. It's been an honor to be with you this year as we continue our work to make the University of Minnesota the best it can be. That concludes my report, and we can now turn to questions. And there were 2 questions submitted in advance, and those both relate to the workforce reinvestment item, and that's later on the agenda, including a presentation. So I would be happy to address any remaining questions after that, but I'm hopeful that those will be addressed by the speakers during that time frame. So at this time, I'd be happy to call on any individuals who would like to ask any questions related to my report. Yeah, Brandy. I'm sorry, you're still on mute.
Sorry about that. You'd think I'd have that down by now. Thank you for taking my question. I'm curious to know what happened to the students' possessions and why haven't they gotten them back from those that were arrested 2 days ago?
I don't know the answer to your first question. I do know that though, I mean, there were some reports that they were trashed, but my understanding is that's not the case, that they've been put in storage, but I have not checked to see if they've come to reclaim them or if there's a process for doing that.
Well, just curious. So how would we find out about the process for those students to reclaim their items?
I can explore with other team members and see if we can post that information. We have a frequently asked questions site, and perhaps that's something that should be added to that.
Thank you.
Whitney.
I think it's through public relations. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
I heard that they were confiscated but available for pickup, and that's through public relations. There's some process, I believe, but not positive.
Okay. Well, we should still probably post it so people can find it. It's great. Okay, Whitney.
Hi, President Ettinger. I was curious if anyone from the administration has sat down with any of the student leaders who are leading protests to meet with them and talk with them.
We have not, as of this time. I expressed even in an interview this morning with the Star Tribune that I'm certainly willing to do that. We had quite a few discussions back in October, and it seems like maybe would be a fruitful time to have those conversations again. I also know in the case of some of the requests of the protesters that they've made some specific requests to speak before the Board of Regents, and so I want to give the board a chance to respond to that first, before interceding on that, but would be open in general to those conversations. Terry. I see a hand up from Terry Caraway, but maybe that's inadvertent. I don't know. Any other questions anybody has? Yeah, Eric, please go ahead.
Hi, President Ettinger. Thanks for taking my question. I was curious about the 1-year ban, right? I understand this has been rescinded, but how did this sort of come into play? It felt sort of an extreme potential punishment, and one that, did the police institute this on their own free will, or was this something that's sort of a standing policy that they sort of move in this direction? They should have anticipated a lot of these folks were students. And if students sort of come under a different process, then I would think they'd be aware of that. I guess as, speaking as chair of AF&T, we sort of worry about, aggressive punishments as a form of trying to squelch speech. And so I'm certainly understand the need to remove tents and things of that nature, but I'd really like to understand better where that ban came from, how it was rescinded, who made those decisions. Thanks.
Sure. I'll give you the best answer I can, and would like to supplement if it turns out there's more information that I could provide. My understanding is that was part of a citation, basically, that was issued to each of the arrested individuals. Once that was kind of called to people's attention that, hey, that standard citation includes this language that I guess is normal trespass-oriented language for people who are not normally on the campus, that it would be understandable that somebody getting that citation would say, hey, look, this seems to apply to me. Are you saying I'm now banned for a year from my either place of employment or my place of being a student? And honestly, as soon as that was brought to people's attention, the determination was made, well, no, that's really not the intention. Certainly, we probably need to relook at those types of citations if that's going to create that false impression.
Yeah, it seems like someone needs to learn those policies a bit, maybe. So, thank you.
Yep, thank you. Terry, there you are.
Yeah, I was having some trouble with my microphone.
Sure.
But anyway, I'm really glad to hear that the campus bans were a mistake that has been corrected. But I also have concerns about any potential criminal charges against the students. Can you give us an update about that, please?
So the arrests kind of on campus of people involved in our community set kind of two processes going, again, based on my understanding. The criminal process, once they were filed at the court, that's within now the judicial systems process. Whether we would get a chance to have some interaction in that process, we don't know. There have been past instances where the legal system has said, hey, look, if you have your own internal system for addressing these kind of things, we might defer to that, but we have not had those conversations yet from anybody within the judicial system. And then there are the internal processes. And indeed, my understanding is it was mostly students. There was one maybe staff person. That's two different processes. Particularly on the student side, my understanding is that those processes rarely proceed during the summer, since students are not around typically then. So that may well be more of a fall process. There are also avenues to have a more informal resolution if the people involved would choose to do that, but that's really kind of up to them if they would want to go the informal route. So that's, I guess we'll stay tuned in terms of what the outcome is of either of those paths, but for right now, that's what I understand.
Just one quick follow-up. I've been involved with similar incidents with students in the past, and this was under President Kaler. And the university can take a more active role and actively make a request to the prosecutors who are handling this case to drop the criminal charges and pursue some sort of restorative justice option. President Kaler, unfortunately, refused to do that, but faculty were able to make a case to the city prosecutor to do that. But I hope in this case that the university will behave differently.
That's helpful, Terry. I mean, there was an incident, honestly, earlier in the year in the fall where some individuals were arrested for defacing property by the Hillel House. And my understanding is restorative justice did become involved with that process, and that so that certainly does seem like that could be a possible outcome. Yeah, Jacob.
Thank you for taking my question. This is also about the protest incident. When I was reviewing some footage of the protest, I believe Wednesday night, I noticed at least 40 state troopers, as well as lots of MPD and possibly more outside agencies. Did the university incur cost to bring these outside agencies in?
I think I mean, I don't know the basis of what you looked at. My guess is we're probably talking about Tuesday night, not Wednesday night. Last night, I don't believe we really had much interaction at all. There were folks here, and I think some people watching a movie on the grass, but it was
Yeah,
the night before. Yeah, I'm sure there are costs. I mean, we do mutual aid. Our UMPD gets involved in mutual aid in Dinkytown, for example. That's primarily the Minneapolis police jurisdiction. If they feel they need to have reinforcements in place, that can work the other direction as well. That's always a challenge to determine, okay, how big of a force of folks do you need to have available? And you can always kind of look at an incident after the fact and think, okay, gee, there not enough occurred to have warranted that amount. But I mean, I guess maybe we err in the direction of we just really want to be sure we don't have a situation that gets out of control and ends up with lots of people getting injured. And so that's I follow the direction that UMPD provides in terms of what they think is necessary. And in each case, when we do bring in those outside agencies, they're under, if they're on our campus, they're under the control, if you will, of the leader, which would be our UMPD person, would be the person who would be calling the shots then in that case.
Thank you. If I could say one more thing, I do believe there possibly should be some more oversight over that, especially if we were paying for those police officers, because, you know, there were probably 5 or 6 police officers for every one student, and they did have no history of violence or anything like that. So I don't think the SWAT teams were needed.
Thank you. Michael.
Thank you, President Ettinger. Yeah, it would be good to get a dollar amount if we can about any cost that went towards SWAT teams or state troopers that were using tuition dollars or tax dollars for those purposes. It would be nice to know what those costs were. I think, you know, the students, I'm a department chair, students are really concerned about free speech. I think many feel that we're failing as an institution to protect free speech. And I guess a related question is, was there planning, or what kind of planning went into anticipating the protests that happened over the past couple of days? Were there coordinations with other universities? Was this anticipated in advance? Were administrators involved in that kind of planning? Can you describe any of that?
I mean, the university's had protest events for dozens of years over multiple topics. I actually happened to be speaking with President Brunix last night at a University of Minnesota baseball game, and he described various things that happened during his time frame. So, yeah, I mean, it certainly is incumbent upon the leadership of an institution to understand and be ready for incidents. I will tell you, when I received the call at 6 in the morning on Tuesday about the tents, that was a new wrinkle to us. I mean, we've had a lot of different activities of gatherings and protests during the year that, from our perspective, have carried on and have been peaceful and have allowed people to have their communication. And so to us, you know, that was the differentiating point, was we've had the policy in place about not allowing encampments. Indeed, when the officers talked to the people that morning, it was kind of like, hey, I mean, we're really interested in just in the tents and taking down the tents. And now if it's your desire to be arrested as part of the statement you're making or whatever, you know, so be it. That's a decision they can make. But that was a difference. I'm not aware of any conversations that, I know I haven't had any. I'm not aware of any of our senior leadership that had conversations with other universities about encampments in particular. Of course, now in the last few days, it's all over all over the country, and it's all over the national news. So I mean, had this been a week later, that's something, yeah, we probably should have been asking somebody about, but at least as of Tuesday morning, we were not aware that that was going to be kind of a new wrinkle to the protest movement, if you will.
Thank you.
Jennifer.
Hi, thank you for taking my question. My question is about, is there a plan or proposal for a de-escalatory strategy to attend to student or any kind of action on campus? I've seen encampments at other universities, and I've seen presidents behave in very different ways. And the police coming 3 hours after the tents appear is an escalatory strategy. And do we have a philosophy of de-escalation? And what could you do moving forward, at least in the next couple of weeks, to use a more de-escalatory approach?
I mean, we're not looking to escalate things, and we are looking to be supportive of the protests. I would point to the later afternoon and evening activities that day, yesterday's activities, thus far today's activities, as being, okay, we're monitoring to make sure that public safety is being considered, but that otherwise, if people protest in a normal manner, we're not looking to escalate or create a confrontation. Are there the question earlier about, are we open to have communications? Yes, it certainly open to do that. As I mentioned, in this case, the preference, or at least what the group has asked for, was the conversation at the Regents meeting. Indeed, my understanding is that's where they are right now, even is over at the Regents building, to again reiterate that desire to have an audience with the Regents on that topic. So I will be in communication with the Regents at some point and see where they land and what they want to do with that. Jerry.
I've just.
Oh,
I've
go ahead
seen
if you have a
other-
follow-up.
I'm sorry. As a follow-up, I've seen other presidents do things like appear at the encampment, talk to the students, show empathy, behave in ways that's de-escalating. And I would love to see that from you. That's all.
Appreciate your input on that. Jerry?
Maybe I'm following her up as well. I've been around a long time, and so I started as a student at the University of California, and 17 students were arrested in my peers, and of those, one was raped, required hospitalization. Another was tried by kangaroo court in jail and had to be hospitalized, fairly severe injuries. And it occurred to me that jail is not a safe place for our students. And so a cavalier attitude about, oh, they wanted to be jailed, is not really a way of us taking professional responsibility for the safety of our own students. Our chancellor, Ivan Hinderaker, who actually is a graduate of the University of Minnesota at the University of California, discussed that with a number of us who were student leaders at the time. And the second time a situation like that occurred, where the students took over the administration building, something which is a lot of fun for all administrators when they can't go to work. He ordered pizza, and he sat down and he talked to the students. After about 1 hour of discussion, they all left together. It was much better. And so the de-escalation techniques, I think donuts and coffee would have been appropriate at 6 a.m., but it seems to me that we should not ever, unless of rape or murder or other severe crimes, have our students arrested. I just throw that out, because I think that they didn't need to be arrested. They shouldn't be arrested. And we have to remember that jail is not a safe place for 20 or 22-year-old students. Not at all. They don't belong there. It's not where they should be. And you cannot guarantee their safety once you have them arrested. And that's kind of my statement on that. I really think pizza or donut diplomacy is a really safe way of dealing with students. And I doubt if these particular students would have harmed you should you have taken that route. So I just put that out there for you.
Okay. I appreciate your input. Thank you, Jerry. Any other questions? If not, let me turn back to the agenda. We are now ready for the provost report. Provost Croson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Interim President Ettinger, and good afternoon, everybody. I have a few updates, and then I don't have any questions submitted in advance, but I'm also happy to take questions. So this year we are searching for 4 new deans. We've brought in finalists for the law school dean search and the dean for undergraduate education. And we're in the process of considering offers for those 2 positions. We have finalists coming in 2 weeks for the dean of the College of Liberal Arts. And we're in the quiet phase of the search for the dean for CCAPS, continuing professional education. So hopefully those will all go smoothly, and maybe we will have a set of new individuals starting in the fall. I also wanted to update on our process around the policy of departmental statements. So my understanding, and I got confirmation from Professor Van Wyk earlier today, is that the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee is working on a set of recommendations or guidelines that will be ready in the end of May. We're working on putting together a task force to receive those recommendations, to work over the summer, and to develop a policy around institutional neutrality, perhaps more broadly, that would then be ready for consultation in the fall. In other news, the U.S. News and World Report's rankings of graduate programs came out, and as usual, our faculty excelled. I should add that there are 3 sets of rankings that have been delayed: medical school rankings, engineering school rankings, and clinical psychology. But of the rankings that were released, we had 41 subjects or specialties rank in the top 25, including just some examples: nursing midwifery at number 3, pharmacy at number 6, educational psychology at number 7, public affairs at number 9. I think there's been a press release about this, and so I just want to congratulate all of our excellent faculty and students and staff that make that recognition possible. We're also tracking a number of issues coming out of the Department of Education. So many of you know about the delays in the FAFSA processing, the federal financial aid applications. When we first learned about these delays, we extended the deadline for students to commit to us to May 15th. We've now sent out about 1/3 of our financial aid offers. That puts us ahead of all of our Big Ten peers. But we're continuing to process those offers. The financial aid staff is working overtime, and we're very grateful for them. And of course, any student who needs, there's a form to fill out, who would like an individual extension, we are happy to offer those. Some of you might have also seen that the Biden administration came out with new Title IX guidelines. I believe those go into effect July 1. I could be off on the date. Tina Marasam and the Office of Equity and Diversity are working on implementing those guidelines. And so you should be seeing some potential policy changes or procedural changes to ensure that we remain compliant. The Department of Education is also has also released some policy around financial transparency and gainful employment. This requires universities to send information to the Department of Education about our students and their debt levels, students who receive federal financial aid and their debt levels. The Department of Education is then going to cross-tab that with data from the IRS to look at their earnings and report out on the the gainful employment, the sort of earnings for the college graduates versus high school graduates in their state for each university, for each major or each program. So we are still working through what that's going to look like, but our first data is due to the Department of Education, I think in the fall, early fall, maybe October. And so our institutional research is working to ensure we're compliant with that. There is activity in the federal level and also at the state level around OPMs, online program management companies. These are companies that many universities contract with in order to help market and recruit for their online degrees. We're following that legislation closely as well. The state legislation applies only to Minnesota State, not to the University of Minnesota. The federal legislation, of course, would apply to everybody. So there's no decision on those yet, but those are still in progress. And then, of course, as I've mentioned in this body before, Twin Cities and Rochester are coming up for our HLC reaccreditation in 2025. In fact, tomorrow there's a site visit from HLC to the Rochester campus. So that is proceeding as planned. Two other topics that I know are going to be the topics of discussion later today, so I'm not going to spend very much on them. As President Ettinger mentioned, we have a workforce resolution discussion today. There's also going to be a presentation at the May board meeting. So they will see what you will see and vice versa. And then we're going to be talking in the Twin Cities delegation meeting about the core curriculum. And I'm happy to take questions about that now, or I can reserve that for the discussion there. So that concludes my report, and I'm happy to take questions about those topics or anything else.
Any questions for the provost? Eric, please go ahead.
Hi, Provost Croson. I just want to make one quick clarifying remark. Our intention is to have recommendations out of AF&T by the end of May. We don't have them yet. We're working diligently to get there, but some committee members may be here and wonder, like, who promised we'd have this done? We are trying. The resolution asks for 6 months, which is a lot less than what we're trying to work with. So I think we'll get there, but you know, we'll see. So
I appreciate that. Thank you, Eric.
thanks.
Any additional questions? I don't see any. Thank you, Provost Croson. Item 9 is the SCC report. Professor B, please go ahead.
Thank you, President Ettinger. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to start with a quick reminder following on the Provost's comment that immediately following today's full University Senate meeting, there will be a separate meeting of the Twin Cities delegation at the University Senate. That includes students, civil service, P&A, and faculty senators from the Twin Cities campus. So Twin Cities folks, please don't go anywhere. At the end of this meeting, we'll be discussing recommendations from the Core Curriculum 2025 committee, which is charged to update the Twin Cities liberal education curriculum. There is no faculty senate meeting today. That meeting has been moved to Monday, May 6th, and this should be on faculty calendars already. As we've already heard, the administration released its response to the workforce reinvestment resolution at our last Senate meeting at the end of March. The SCC held one meeting since then, and the committee devoted the entire meeting to discussing the task force recommendations that formed the basis of the administration's response. I invited co-chairs of the administration's task force to give a brief presentation at today's Senate meeting and to field questions from senators. I hope you all got several emails from me about that. The SCC and I are very interested in hearing input and feedback from all senators at our meeting today. You've heard mention of that there will be a presentation on the response at the May 10th board meeting. I've been invited to participate in that to provide a University Senate perspective on the response. And so I hope everyone has come prepared today for an engaging discussion later in the meeting on this topic. Immediately following that discussion today, the Senate office will drop a link to a very brief survey into the chat asking for further input from all senators. I'll also circulate that by email following the meeting. Now, I fully understand it can feel like death by survey sometimes, but I would ask you to please take just a minute to complete this very short survey. It's just a couple of questions and then an open-ended one if you like. Hearing from all of you is going to be really important in determining, I think, how Senate leadership continues to engage with the incoming president and the administration around workforce issues next year. Now, moving on, I want to call everyone's attention to an email you received on Monday of this week from Amber Bathke in the Senate office. It included a link to a resolution pertaining to email for life. My understanding, this resolution is going to be introduced under new business later at today's meeting. And so at this time, Amber, if I could ask you to please drop a link to that resolution into the chat so that all the senators who have not already read it can maybe try to do so before we come to new business today. Thanks in advance for that, Amber. Excuse me. As President Ettinger has mentioned, this is his last University Senate meeting before ending his term July 1. And on this occasion, I'm reminded of my very first meeting that I ever had with President Ettinger. I was SCC chair, vice chair at the time. And it was an onboarding meeting with Senate leadership. It was late May of last year. It was a couple of weeks before he even started his term. Now, he showed up with pen and paper. He listened diligently. He took lots of notes as we explained how our University Senate structure works, and he asked lots of great questions. And I recall at the time thinking, boy, I hope he stays this engaged over the course of the next academic year. I'm grateful that this has turned out to be the case. He's been fully engaged in our Senate meetings. He's provided substantive updates on what the administration's been up to. He's answered questions to the best of his ability. And was just engaged with all of these issues in sort of formal meetings he had with SCC leadership over the past year. Now, of course, it's important to understand that engagement is not the same thing as agreement. While President Ettinger has not necessarily agreed with those of us in the Senate or the Senate leadership on every single issue, he has engaged with us in a meaningful way on those issues. And so President Ettinger, on behalf of the Senate, I want to thank you for stepping up to take on this role for a year and for your engagement with our shared governance system. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Finally, I would be remiss if I did not also take this opportunity to say one more thank you, and that is to Erin Heath. This is also Erin Heath's last University Senate meeting as, in this case, as director of the Senate office. She and her sort of dedicated, fantastic team in the Senate office do much, much more than I think most of us are really aware of to really make all of this work happen. So Erin has been a tremendous colleague and a collaborator this past year. I've relied on her as a sounding board, as a source of advice and institutional knowledge about a great many things. And she's always helped steer me in the work we were doing in a better direction than I think it would have gone in without her input. So Erin, I just want to personally thank you to thank you for all the help you've been to me this year. And on behalf of the body, again, I want to thank you for your outstanding service to University Senate governance. And that concludes the SCC Chair's report.
Thank you very much, Mark. We'll move to item 10, which is the Vicki R. Courtney Award for Outstanding Service to University Senate Governance. Professor Ned Patterson will present this item.
Thank you, President Ettinger. Ned Patterson, faculty in Vet Med and the current University Senate clerk. And as clerk, I'm chair of the committee that selects these awards recipients. So this is, again, the Vicki R. Courtney Award for Outstanding Service to the University Senate Governance. Vicki retired a few years ago, and many of you knew her. She was Senate director for many years. And so this award is based on the recipient's contribution to and impact on University Senate governance and how the nominee has inspired others in Senate governance. There were many very good nominations this year, and there's unfortunately only one award for each category: faculty, P&A, civil service, and student. We would have liked to give more awards out, but that's what we're limited to. This year, I'll note there was not a civil service nomination. Award recipients will receive a one-time $1,000 stipend and an engraved plaque. I encourage people to think about nominating people next year, and you can talk to the Senate staff about that process. And so now I'd like to announce the three awardees, and then when their names announced, if they could turn their video on and just say a brief hi, that would be great. I think two of them are on here for sure. So the faculty award goes to Colleen Flaherty Manchester, professor in the Carlson School of Management. Congratulations, Colleen.
Thanks, Ned. I'll be speaking a little bit about the workforce resolution in a few minutes, but I really appreciate the recognition. It's quite an honor.
Congratulations, Colleen. And the P&A award goes to Catherine Dowd, who's the administrative director of the School of Mathematics in the College of Science and Engineering. Are you on, Catherine?
I am. Thank you very much, Ned. I really appreciate the recognition. It means a lot to me because I really benefited from Vicki's mentorship when I was P&A chair and throughout my career serving on Senate committees. Thank you very much.
Great. Congratulations again. And the student award goes to Jessica Grittner, who's a PhD graduate student in rehabilitation Sciences in the medical school. I don't think Jessica's here, but I'll just double check. Is Jessica here?
See her.
Don't believe so. So congratulations, Jessica. And now I'll turn back to you, President Ettinger.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to each of the recipients. Item number 11 is a legislative update provided by one of our faculty legislative liaisons, Professor Donna Spanismar. Please proceed.
Thank you. President Ettinger already mentioned a number of the updates. The capital investment bill is the main one that we're asking you to respond to. I can go through the core mission support, academic support requests were not funded, and PELRA seems to be moving forward. So everyone here should have gotten an email this week asking you to contact your legislators. Where faculty can now have the most impact, or anyone at the university, faculty, staff, students can have the most impact, is contacting your legislators about supporting the Higher Education Asset Preservation and Replacement, or HEAPR request. Mark, this week, yesterday, Mark B. and I went to see Senator John Marty, the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, and he also stressed how important it is having faculty and staff and students tell their stories. So I told him about the hole in my office wall here and how it rained and flooded my carpet last week, and I get 3 to 4 wasps in my office every spring and fall. There are lots of worse conditions than that across campus in some of the buildings. Dr. Rao was with us also and talked about how the building that she's in is condemned. So you all have HEAPR stories. I'm sure the vast majority of you have HEAPR stories about where you teach, where your office is. Telling those stories makes a difference to legislators. And no one can tell your story better than you. Rob Blair and I can go and talk to the legislators, and we do, and some of you have sent us your stories, but no one can tell your story better than you. So you got the action alert. It couldn't be easier to send an email. There's a link in the email. There's a pre-written email, and your email will go to the governor and lieutenant governor and the senator and the representative. And instead of just sending that canned email, add your story to the text of the email. Change the subject line so it doesn't look like they're getting letters that are all canned emails. So it may say, instead of HEAPR is cheaper, say HEAPR is cheaper in CFANS, or I could say HEAPR is cheaper in medical lab sciences. Encourage your colleagues, your faculty, your staff to respond to the email. The more emails they get from faculty and staff, hearing those stories, the more they will start to see how important it is. So also, if you haven't already done so, sign up for advocates.umn.edu so you get these emails, action alerts, so you can respond. But I know that's been sort of, I hate to keep nagging you about this, but really getting more than just Rob and I involved in going down to talk to legislators. Mark B. went with me, Dr. Rao went with me from CFANS, alumni went with me, getting you to tell your stories either in the email, or I'd be happy to go down to the Capitol with you. It's really an important thing that will make a difference. And next year we will be, one of the reasons I asked Mark to come down with me is so that we could stress the importance of workforce reinvestment, faculty salaries, staff salaries, and that will be an issue next year. So we're trying to get them primed for next year. We're trying to get them to support HEAPR this year, but we need your help. So that's all I'll say. I'll get off the soapbox now.
Thank you so much for both your report and your work, Professor Spanismar.
Thank you.
Item number 12 is an update from the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, and we have Lisa Lewis, our president and CEO, with us today. But before I turn the floor over to her, I want to recognize and congratulate the UMMA on their 120-year anniversary this year, and also call senators' attention to a letter of recognition that the SCC sent to honor the occasion. This appeared on last month's docket. The UMAA fosters alumni connections with one another and with the university, leveraging the talent and generosity of its vast network of alumni to support student success and advance the university's mission through mentorship, advocacy, philanthropy, and more. We'd like, as kind of a fun little thing, we'll give this a try, to have anyone who's present who is an alum of the university, turn on your videos momentarily and raise your hands. And Amber is going to take screenshots, so keep them up for a minute or two here so we can show the appreciation to Lisa and others and just how impactful this group really is. So thank you all very much for that. I will now welcome Lisa Lewis, our great president and CEO of the UMMA, to provide her update. Lisa, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. And it's a pleasure and honor to be with you today. Lisa Lewis. I've been in this role for 11 years and in alumni relations for 30 years. And boy, is it heartwarming to see all of those videos go on and your hands raised, because we talk about the talent that comes out of this university, but to have you stay at your alma mater and continue to serve and lead is just really wonderful. Today, I'm going to briefly share who we are, the work that we do, and how it supports the university. But most importantly, I'm really here to say thank you to all of you for the work you do to support our students who are our future alumni. These graduates, as we all know, they're the outcome of the university's teaching mission, and they take their degrees and they go forth to change the world. And I don't say that boldly, I say that honestly, because I get to see the results of your work every day through the alumni stories. So when I'm meeting with alumni, they'll tell me about a particular faculty member or staff member, and they'll say it by name, somebody who impacted their life, who went the extra mile to make sure that they overcame obstacles and they were able to finish their degree. And it may have been 10 or 20 or even 50 years ago, but it doesn't matter. They still remember, and they credit their time at the university and the people who cared about them for setting them on a path for their current career and life success. And that's one of the reasons that the UMAA supports the Distinguished Teaching Awards, which we just held a couple of weeks ago. Great alumni come from great teachers, and we appreciate all of you who ensure our students have the right opportunities to learn and grow both in and out of the classroom. The UMAA is part of the 112-year-old shared governance model. And today, 11 alumni volunteers serve on 4 university Senate committees, providing alumni perspectives on important university topics. And I know that each of those volunteers is honored to serve in this storied Senate and to be part of the work it does for the university. And these volunteers are part of a much larger alumni community that is loyal and organized. As Interim President Ettinger said, 120 years ago, they came together and formed the Alumni Association with a mission to foster connections between alumni, students, and friends, and to promote the greater good of the university. And we're continuing that tradition with legislative advocacy. You just heard that great report from Donna. We support student success through mentorship. We elevate alumni small business owners through the Minnesota Alumni Market. And we share alumni and university stories of impact through our magazine and many other initiatives that are outlined in your docket materials. Today, there are 622,000 living alumni around the world from all 5 campuses. And currently more than 60% live in the state, which is among the highest in the Big Ten. Yes, we are a competitive group. Collectively, we do a great job keeping our talented alumni right here in Minnesota, supporting the state's economy and the needs of Minnesotans everywhere. And whether they live in Minnesota or across the country or around the world, they find ways to stay connected and support their alma mater. In FY23, more than 151,000 alumni supported the university through 6 modes of engagement. Their talent and interest has a profound impact on the university. They are our brand ambassadors, role models to current and prospective students, legislative advocates, alumni association members, season ticket holders, volunteers, donors, and more. As the Alumni Association turns 120 years old this year, we are honored that the Senate Consultative Committee congratulated the Alumni Association on this major milestone. And in fact, Governor Walz also proclaimed January 30th, which was the actual day of our founding, as U of M Alumni Association Day. In his proclamation, he honored the impact alumni have had on the U of M and the state of Minnesota. So to close, I bring a thank you from the University of Minnesota Alumni Association's Board of Directors, the governing body of the Alumni Association. And as part of that, the Faculty Consultative Committee has an ex officio spot on our board, currently filled by Dr. Julie Olson from the School of Dentistry, and we are grateful for her service. So thank you for your time and for honoring the UMAA during its 120th anniversary. And that concludes my remarks, and I ask for your continued involvement and support of the university, along with our 622,000 alumni.
Well, thank you very much, Lisa, for your report and for your work throughout the year. Fantastic. And I look forward to celebrating with the group tomorrow evening. Item number 13 is a discussion of the response to the Workforce Reinvestment Resolution. When we met last month, the written administrative response was delivered in your docket materials, along with a comprehensive report that was a product of a task force led by Mary Roman Kuhl and Beth Lewis, who you will hear from shortly. That report responds to their charge to develop recommendations that address the priorities in the original resolution. I will note that Provost Croson, Vice President Schwartzman, and I are also presenting on this topic, along with FCC Chair Professor Mark B. at the May 10th Board of Regents meeting. The board has expressed a strong interest in this item, and we look forward to answering their questions and taking their feedback on how to engage our incoming president on these priorities. Today, I anticipate we will have a robust dialogue on this item. So at this point, I will invite Mary Roman Kuhl, Senior Director of Total Rewards in the Office of Human Resources, and Beth Lewis, Vice Provost for Faculty and Academic Affairs, to give us an overview of their work. The governance advisory members will also be given an opportunity to speak to their role in the process before we move to discussion. Please proceed.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Roman Kuhl, Senior Director of Total Rewards at the university. I'm going to talk real briefly about the charge of our task force, the process that we took, and the report that we created. So first, we were given a charge to provide an item-by-item response to the 23 numbered and lettered suggestions, including in all of our explanation or logic for any priorities that we deem to be, the quote was, off the table. So that was the request, item-by-item response to these 23 items. And then we were asked to include expected time horizons for addressing the priorities and create a multi-year plan with commitments and goals. And finally, develop and identify metrics to assess our success. So that was the charge. And then our process, Beth Lewis and I chaired this task force. And you can see here we had members on the task force that are leaders from various offices and very unique and different. And I think very, very well formed. We had governance committee members on the task force that were either chairs or past chairs. And these individuals, we didn't just call them periodically throughout our work. They came to every meeting. We worked through items together, and it was a very collaborative process. We spent a lot of time together. We had 9 90-minute meetings. I don't think anyone knew that we'd have quite so many meetings when we started out our process. But here's why we ended up taking that much time to meet. We really took time to walk through each of those 23 items. We asked the group to please just describe, we read it, we could read the statements, but we're like, tell us more what's underneath that. Tell us kind of the root behind each of those items. And we just made sure that we really understood what was being requested. And sometimes it was interesting. the item would read a certain way and it was exactly as it appeared. And then other times they were written a certain way, but as we talked more, we understood there might be something a little bit different that was being maybe requested. So once we got done with that part of the process, we took the 23 items and just to kind of make kind of inroads on each of them, we batched them into 7 key categories. Those are the categories you see as headers in the report, things like, you know, talent development, benefits, comp, flex work, and so forth. Once we had those 7 categories, we then took like roughly the last half of our meetings and we dedicated either a half or sometimes a full meeting to each of those topics. And we discussed as a team strategies that we might be able to take to address each of the items. And that helped inform our advisory report. So last thing I wanted to mention that is that report. Each of the 23, so Beth and I, after the teams had met, after we'd had those meetings, Beth and I started to write. And she and I were the authors of the document that you have read through. Each of the 23 requests we prioritized over the course of 3 years. So the team didn't do that, but she and I, after discussing things, we kind of set out what we thought a course of action could be. And as I say that, I think it's really important to state it's a first, attempt at what it could be. And we know that that's not what it will be. That's where we get to get more input from many parties and all of you. And we just have a real commitment to bringing something to life. But at least it's a place now to start like an attempt at a 3-year plan. So we put things over the course of 3 years. We identified a few items that we felt would be off the table. We use that phrase off the table. And then when we got done writing the report, we gave it to the team members and asked them just to review it and adjust any inaccuracies. We didn't give them a chance, of course, to change the priorities or flip things like that. But we said anything here that's factually incorrect or didn't represent the team's voice, we want to hear about that. And then we would make those corrections. And then we delivered that to the president's office. And Beth has got a few additional slides here she's going to walk through.
Thank you, Mary. I'm Beth Lewis, and I'm the Vice Provost for Faculty and Academic Affairs. I'd like to transition and talk just a little bit about the recommendations and to note that our task force report and recommendations help inform President Ettinger's administrative response. So that came after that. One of the biggest issues that came up multiple times in our meetings and also in the report was issues around compensation. And we do want to highlight that we did suggest, we are planning to do a compensation governance committee that will go into place and sort of start addressing the issues that we realize, but we do realize that this is just a start. So the report is really written on the perspective of uncertainty regarding financial availability for compensation adjustments. So we wrote the report last fall, and at that point we didn't know what the legislature was going to do in regards to the 45 million. So that is the perspective of the original report. We do want to highlight just a couple of things that we've already done. One was the service awards, and this is awards that are given out for somebody going over and above what they typically are doing in a department. We can have up to 160 of these awards. Each one is $500, and then there's larger ones as well. And this is automatically given if the department chair nominates a person from their department. Mary has worked really hard to reduce any barriers to the Regent Scholarship Program and has done a fabulous job of already addressing that this year. Thanks to Colleen and others at the FCC, we expanded the writing hunkers. And these are for faculty where we do 3 times a year, anywhere from 3 to 5 days. People come together and we facilitate a space for them to write and do focus groups. Some of the items that we think we can address pretty soon is to establish, like I said before, the Compensation Governance Committee. We will, as we've always done, continue to advocate for market adjustments and to encourage multi-year contracts for individuals in contract faculty positions and also in lecturer and teaching specialist positions. We plan to also implement a system-wide minimum per credit policy for individuals who are adjunct faculty. Right now, there is no minimum. We also want to work on a pilot program to establish equity regarding distribution of work. We recognize that there are huge variabilities in terms of the amount of service that individuals take on, especially those over and above what they typically are doing. So we want to do and how courses are divided out and assigned. So we want to do some work with departments to kind of figure out how we can have some strategies and best case scenario situations with that. And we want to do, and Mary's team will do this, a cost benefit analysis of priorities for benefits as we look forward to what kind of benefits should be offered. Before we turn over for questions, we want to acknowledge that addressing all this is a really complex issue and it will take some time. We consider, as Mary alluded to, this a roadmap that likely will be modified over time as we obtain more feedback, we get more information as we transition to a new president. We are committed to continuing to work with the Senate to address these issues. And as was stated before, this will be presented at the Board of Regents on May 8th. I know you're giving the report in response ahead of time, so we want to save most of the time for questions. But before we do that, I do want to turn it over to Colleen, Adolfo, and Charles to see if anyone does have anything to add in addition to this overview.
Thanks. Thank you, Beth and Mary. So I'm going to speak on behalf of the other advisors. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to share experiences and thoughts as advisors on the Workforce Reinvestment Resolution Task Force. So the other advisors were Adolfo Correa Cabello and Charles Rank, who are fellow senators, P&A and civil service employees, respectively. So first, we just want to start by thanking the administration for inviting us to participate as advisors on the task force. And second, to recognize the co-chairs for their efforts in leading this important work and for ensuring that all the task force members were kind of fully engaged in this process. So in terms of the work of the task force, like Mary mentioned, there was a lot of real positives. So as advisors, we are actually like equal contributors. So we are at every meeting. The discussions were robust, open, and I think really productive with kind of full engagement by all the members. As advisors, we were able to share kind of the underlying motivations, stressors, and the lived experiences of the employees that we had heard from. So myself and other Adolfo and others who had been authors on the resolution. So we knew a lot of those experiences and we could report those back. So really to bring the different priorities and principles to life. We appreciate the systematic approach that the task force took in terms of like grouping the priorities in terms of, next steps, as well as thinking about and pushing to think more beyond just the immediate cost, but really what was the value that it could bring to the mission work, as well as kind of efforts to try to see that bigger picture. Just in terms of some challenges that we observed as task force advisors, a recurrent challenge was the need to kind of convey that this resolution is a form of employee listening, that it reflected this years of consultation that was mentioned and listening, and not only within governance, but outside of governance structures as well. And it was, unanimously approved by this body. So I think we wanted to emphasize that it is employee listening. We also want to emphasize again that these workplace issues were being felt across the different employee groups. And that was like a key motivation for the resolution in the first place, that we really need to consider this ecosystem of the employees at the university. And so in terms of any longer term solutions, and then the solution, I think, also needs to think about what efforts and responsibilities can be delegated to the units versus what role and accountability does the university system overall need to have and play. So taking this into account, we agree that this is like a really important first step. We appreciate the efforts laid out to get us started, and we acknowledge the current constraints in terms of the leadership transitions and funding. At the same time, we see it as critical that the U makes its people the centerpiece of how it delivers on its mission work. And that is actually the first statement of the resolution. In this larger effort of workforce reinvestment, we see as really needing to be a top priority for the Board of Regents and the next administration as we continue to work together to deliver on our mission and serve the state of Minnesota.
Great, thank you.
Beth, did you have more?
No, that was it.
Great. Did Adolfo or Rick want to say anything? Or?
Thank you, President Edinger. Colleen spoke on our behalf. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay, I think we are ready for the discussion part, and we'll ask Aaron to call on folks.
Okay, looks like we have quite a few. So as a reminder, can you message me privately and let me know if you are pro or con? So Sarah, if you can let me know.
Okay, I am working on sending the message.
Okay.
So my position is a little bit both pro and con. I hope that's an acceptable position to be. First of all, so I'm Sarah Buchanan. I'm on the Morris campus and a French faculty person here. And I want to first say that I'm very grateful for all people involved in the formulation of the workforce reinvestment resolution and also the task force and to the administration for considering these requests. I know that it's a long process and very involved. We on the Morris campus sent the documents to all of our faculty and to our staff and asked for people to provide questions. And we have 6 that have percolated through. So I will try to get them through them in my 2 minutes. So number 1, in terms of professional development leaves for academic, professional, and administrative employees, there was a request that more data be collected on who actually uses this policy, and that data be campus specific. And also, what are the outcomes of this policy for the staff, and how has it led to increases in productivity or advances in careers? For the workload focused requests, we had people nod their heads or agree with the idea that when in the facilitate a culture change that empowers employees to use their work time for tasks and projects most impactful to their roles. And also, I guess it was mainly that one. What they said is it feels like the discussion and the plans in the report presented so far have focused mostly on faculty. And so the question is, are there plans in place to expand these discussions to non-faculty employee groups? When could we expect to hear more about those plans? Number 3, in terms of compensation.
30 seconds left.
Oh, all right. So what, if anything, can be done to increase the salaries on the Morris campus in particular, which have been woefully behind forever? And also adding that we had a faculty research enhancement fund on our campus that is going away. This fund recognized that we are 3 hours away from an airport. And so there's travel and hotel expenses that add on to our research expenses. And so what can be done to replace that? Salaries for temporary positions when somebody goes on leave and we have to hire them, can that be more proactive, and can there be a more transparent process about that? And last but not least, there was great support for a tuition benefit for dependents of faculty and staff. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that. I took notes, and I think we could circle back on those. I didn't know if you want anything specific, but that's what I was with all 6 of those.
I think that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Ellen Messer-Davidow, and there is no need to do pro-con, so go ahead.
Thank you very much. And thanks to the committee and consultants for their hard work. I have 4 comments, and they all concern materiality. First, how do we increase salaries? And what I know from serving on the Senate Finance and Planning Committee is we're not likely to get a huge increase in state funding or tuition funding. And that's going to mean redirecting some of the resource flows within the university away from certain things toward competitive salaries and gaps. Secondly, the report did not address in any substantive way gender wage gaps. It's 45 years since the Regender settlement. We've had gender wage gaps for 45 years. It's never been fixed. It needs to be fixed. Third, I see a lot of committee work, and then if we add to that committee work we're going to be doing with the new curriculum liberal education project, how do we attenuate the burnout that the report does suggest is already occurring? And fourth, I was a little bit bothered by some of the language in the report, encouraging such and such, advocating for such and such. That's not the same as remedying such and such. So in general, the structure of the report is that it kicks the can down 3 or 4 years to study and analyze certain issues. And I don't see a real commitment to remedies. And it's not a criticism of the committee. It's we need to do something about some of the real inequities that the Senate report addressed and that this report attempts to address. Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have, and Peter, I apologize if I don't get your name right. Peter Makovicki, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Erin. Thank you for letting me speak here. With the understanding that we're probably not looking at major salary increases in the near future, is there the power within the units to actually look at things like merit-based increases for faculty in a different way? Right now, according to the Board of Regents, it's purely merit-based with no cost of living adjustment, which differs from some of our other employees. Would it be possible within individual units, if they agree on it, to have a different merit-based increase structure where everyone gets a certain allocation that is a cost of living adjustment, and then some other part that is purely a merit-based contribution to their pay? This was raised in the resolution. It's not clear from what the report from the committee whether or not there is an opening for units to make decisions on this on their own. Thank you for taking my question.
Mary, you want to go ahead?
Could I ask, it's funny because kind of taking these notes, also taking a lot of notes here, gathering them. Would you like us to listen and then reply, or should we reply, after each person? How would you like that to proceed, Erin? I just didn't want it to get too far.
Yeah, yeah, so I think, go ahead.
Question, which is, I think a brief reply would be appropriate, but keeping it brief so that we can get to as many questions as possible would also be appreciated. So
Yes. All right. So I think one of the things that I just want to say in response to the last speaker is we do try to have units, colleges, campus units use the same salary increase approach. However, that being said, that is one item we do want to look at. We want to take this next year and ask the question, with the limited funds that we have and the pools we have, are we spending that? Are we distributing that in the most effective way or not? So we want to actually turn that over and figure that out, because there may be a more effective way to deliver that money. I should add to a previous comment too, was I really love the comment about the words encourage and advocate, but where is remedying? I took that note down, and we do have plans that have not been probably communicated yet, but I think it's okay to share this. We're going to be doing our merit increase planning here. We have a memo that comes out every year, and it's coming out in just a couple of weeks. And we'll talk about the fund that we have for the year. And then normally we also have market adjustment accounts for the year too. This year, what we're doing is we're saying we feel it's very critical. What we heard from this group is pay is priority one. And so we do want to move forward with bringing civil service and P&A all pay rates to at least that $20 an hour. And that'll be something that we're doing. So there's a remedy. It's not everything. but we kind of have to get these priorities and pick things and move what we think is most critical first, second, third, fourth. But that, we're very committed. We're not going to get it all right, but I love the comment about remedying, so.
Okay, so with that, Scott Creer, please go ahead.
Thank you, Interim President Ettinger and members of the committees and task force who worked on these items for discussion. My questions and concerns stem from an expectation of the report product based on the length of time it took to deliver such a response report. This body waited almost a year for this response, and these issues are not new. I myself sat across the table at a P&A Senate Benefits and Compensation Committee meetings before the pandemic, discussing these very issues with members of the task force over 6 years ago. And there were others before me doing the same. So now to receive a formal response devoid of basic information like budgetary impact estimates, which would be expected of any other P&A employee producing such a report within any of the units in a much shorter time frame, sends a message that these issues are not important or will continue to be in committee after committee for discussion after discussion with no action. In 2022, P&A Senate roughly estimated the budget shortfall between the current compensation levels at the time, which were 11% below market on average, to get them to 5% below market was roughly $78 million for P&A and civil service. I would imagine that amount has only grown now. These numbers and data were from OHR and highlighted to OHR and the regions at the time. What is the plan to adequately address this budgetary issue within the next 2 years? When will this actually be a priority and not an afterthought of the budget process? We, the university, seem to be adding services with no plan to pay for
30
them.
seconds.
Yet we hesitate to adequately address these employee issues. The other thing missing from the response is the consideration of the realistic impact. An example of this was the request to have dependents covered under the Regents Scholarship, which can you only imagine going to the legislature and fighting for funding for UMN employees' tuition? This would be a non-starter, yet it's not even mentioned in the response. Why are we willing to form a committee to resolve that issue, one that we know that cannot happen, yet we're hesitant or unwilling to seriously address market competitive pay? The response taking this long to produce without tangible policy changes or budgetary impacts sends a signal that this university is unable to operate effectively and efficiently, being paralyzed by process, committees, and ineptitude. I'm not
Sorry,
pro
speaker's time is up.
Okay.
And I will note, sorry, Aaron, I will note this item is just till 4 o'clock, so I think we'll get to as many as we can, but it may not be able to get to everybody with their hands up.
Okay, first I was going to ask if anybody wanted to respond to Scott's comment or if I should call on the next person.
Maybe we should just call. I think given the time constraint, it might be good just to hear people. If there's something real critical with a very exact response, we can chime in. Otherwise, I just really want to hear what people have to say.
Okay. Okay, so next we have Adolfo Carrillo Cabello. Adolfo, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, and I'm speaking as a CLA senator and not as a contributor to the workforce resolution authorship. I have been at the university for 8 years, and as a bilingual employee, I have been happy to use this skill to amplify the resources and level of engagement we can provide in my unit. While this is an overt, hard skill, being bilingual is not a recognizable skill for most positions at the university. For the proposal for a shift to job mastery for merit increases, I appreciate the attention to biases, but I'm unclear about mitigating strategies that go beyond raising awareness. My question pertains to the definition of job mastery. What I've been hearing from my constituents is a strong concern about this approach, given that P&A employees wear multiple hats and position descriptions often do not accurately represent responsibilities being performed, and for some responsibilities are in flux, given restructuring or reorganization in their units. Further, I have heard concerns about the shift to a job mastery approach based on the based on the circumstances I have mentioned. My constituents are particularly interested in learning more about the processes that might be used to establish achievement criteria and performance levels, and how employees could contribute to these principles beyond those established in shared governance entities. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Matthew Wynn. Please go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm Matthew Wynn. I'm in CLA and Speech Language Hearing Sciences, representing the views of the department, not just myself. So I'm grateful for the resolution and the task force. I wanted to raise a couple points that could deserve extra attention, particularly because my department is a little different than some others. We have a lot of P&A staff, so the issue of reclassification affects us. We feel it could affect us differently than in some departments. So I asked that some consideration be taken to receive input from departments where P&A staff play an outsized role. For example, our clinical staff who train students in speech language pathology and audiology. The second of 2 points I want to raise is about the workload burden. This goes back to this theme of recognizing versus remedying. So the idea, there was an impression that investment in writing hungers doesn't really solve the workload problem. This probably received the most discussion among our faculty. So we urge the body to please build a concrete plan to relieve the burden of continual urgent work, seeing that the feeling has arisen that the university is divested from the support staff in order to achieve a short-term financial benefit. And that has caused now a downstream effect of paralyzing innovation because the faculty are burdened with this continuous work. And to reiterate that first point, which is that some departments, smaller ones in particular, might be especially affected by this because administrative support staff could number one or fewer than one in FTE. So the idea is to produce that concrete plan and to consider input from departments that might be smaller or different than others in some way. Thank you.
Yeah, I do want to acknowledge too that the hungers is such a small part of this. This is something that we had been actually already starting on before we started writing this report. So we want to note that was something we had done. But I do think that, you know, I was department chair for 6 years and I saw firsthand how, and myself, as an instructor, how, you know, how the burden has increased in terms of teaching courses. It's much more complex now to teach a class of 200. It's much more, even a class of 10 at this point, in terms of some of the ways that things have changed, in terms of additional accommodations and some of the increased mental health we've seen among students. And so we do acknowledge that. And I do think it's a very complex issue that I think we need to look at more and figuring out how we can help with that. But I do want to acknowledge that, yes, I completely agree with you that the hungers are just a small part of it. So thank you for that.
Okay, next we have Charles Rank. Charles, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Charles Rank. I'm speaking as a civil service senator, not as a member of the task force. But real quick, I just wanted to reiterate something I've heard time and time again from constituents in university services, civil service employees, is that how greatly it would benefit them to have the spousal and dependent tuition benefit for the university. I think a lot of people are afraid that they would come off as a non-starter. And that may be because there is this commonly held misconception in the public that all of us are overpaid administrators, when really we should remember that there are so many people at the university who would benefit, such as, you know, our buildings and grounds workers and the cooks who work in our dining halls, who aren't, you know, making professor salaries or, you know, all that much money. So I would just like to reiterate that it would be a huge benefit to so many people.
Thanks, Charles, too. And we do, the tuition is free for anyone making under 80,000 as well. So that is one work in the right direction for that. But yes, I've noted your stance on it. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Annie Bigley. Annie, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Annie Bigley. I'm a PNA senator from CLA, the College of Liberal Arts on the Twin Cities campus, and I'll be quick. One of the things I've heard from my constituents over and over again is they would like more information on the lens or framework that's used in thinking about the DE&I of it all and sort of what we plan to do in terms of closing not just the gender wage gap, but a lot of different gaps for folks from a lot of different identities that have been marginalized. So there would just like to be more transparency around sort of what framework or lens or how that's incorporated throughout this. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Elizabeth Stahl. Please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Liz Stahl, Extension, faculty senator with Extension. And yes, again, thank you all for bringing this forward. Just to summarize from my constituents too, yes, we all agree the pay issue is huge. I've chaired a search committee for 3 times. We're going to be on the committee again the 4th time. We're competing with industry for my positions, but we're not competing with industry for my positions because we're just not attracting people with the pay gap as big as it is right now. But I do have one comment that is not pay related. It was due to Principle 4, was requested from one of our constituents that we do add that anybody in a supervisory role, that they do make it mandatory that they do attend some leadership training to help with this. So.
Okay, and then last but not least, Carolyn, please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Liebler. I'm a sociology faculty member at the Twin Cities campus. My constituents piped in about salary, and one thing that I think is especially important, one member suggested using a model that's apparently at Rutgers University, where they do 1 year that's only cost of living, and then the following year's merit raises based on 2 years of work, which reduces the committee work because in the year that you're doing cost of living, you don't have to assess everybody. And it also is more on pace with the academic schedule. A year is not very long in terms of publishing for academia. So it would encourage more quality and less of a push towards quantity. And you mentioned that right now, sociology can't just do that. We have to do what everyone else does. So I would urge that committee to either take up this approach, which I think is a great idea, or allow us to go our own way. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for your participation. Before we move on to the next item, I'd like to give Mark B a chance to have sort of the last word, at least for today.
Hi, thank you, President Ettinger. I just wanted to quickly give a plug for the survey that's going to be appearing. It just appeared in the chat. Please take a moment to fill it out if you would, please. It's really short. There are 3 questions. Who are you? How satisfied are you with the response? How important is future investment? And then there's an open question where you can fill in opinions, provide any questions that you didn't get a chance to ask today. We would love to hear the feedback from all of you. So please click on the survey link, and it'll take you less than a minute for most of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Item number 14 concerns resolution from the Disabilities Issues Committee. This resolution was discussed at last month's meeting and is presented today for a vote. I will first call on Professor Jennifer McComas, the chair of the Disabilities Issue Committee, to provide a brief reminder about the resolution.
Thank you for having me. The Disability Issues Committee has presented a resolution for the university to fund a full-time recovery on campus coordinator for students who are in recovery from substance abuse. And we've consulted with a lot of folks, and it would be located in Boynton for now, but it would go a long way to support students and give them a sense of connection and belonging, and hopefully retain them on campus rather than them running into troubles and having to drop out.
Very good, thank you. Is there any discussion? And if you do have a question or comment, please raise your hand and send a chat to Aaron stating whether your comment is pro, con, or other, and I will defer to Aaron to call on people in the appropriate order.
Okay, Sarah, I think this one we do pro and con, correct?
Yep, I think I just sent it to you, Erin, so you should have it. I am pro.
Okay.
And I think this is a wonderful initiative, and I'm just wondering if it is system-wide or if it's just for the Twin Cities campus.
Thanks for that, Sarah. Right now, the position would be for the Twin Cities campus, and part of the responsibilities that we foresee would be doing a detailed analysis of the needs on the other campuses. Because as we spoke with the affiliate campuses, the needs really vary quite a bit across them. And so in order to really better understand those, one of the responsibilities of the coordinator, as we foresee it, would be to do that kind of analysis and make some recommendations accordingly.
That would be a great first step. Thank you.
Don't see any other comments or questions. We can now proceed to the motion on the floor. So Amber, please initiate the poll.
A few more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 120 ayes and 3 nays, this motion carries.
Thank you all.
Very good. Item 15 is a discussion on a proposed definition of a culture of safety that the Campus Safety Committee has been working on. Professor Edgar Arriaga, the chair of that committee, will provide a brief overview, and then we will proceed to discussion. Edgar, please proceed.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me here today. And what I would like to do today is just to start by addressing our President Ettinger, the senators, and our guests. And as we convene this virtual space today and reflect about the safety of our university community being of such an important issue, and we can think of all the incidents related to protests, sports events, to classrooms and building access, from risks due to fire, to exposure to hazardous materials and weather events, from cyber threats and sexual assault, to concerns about walking alone at night. We realize that we face a myriad of safety challenges in our dynamic environment. And it is crucial that we collaborate to establish a culture of safety that extends to every campus and individual within the University of Minnesota. So I'm here to introduce a definition of a culture of safety for the University of Minnesota that has been approved by the Senate Campus Safety Committee. And as you may know, this is the youngest of all the Senate committees. So this definition underscores our shared commitment to prioritize safety for every student, staff, faculty, and visitor at the University of Minnesota. So let's envision a setting where everyone feels safe, valued, respected, a place where open communication, accountability, and continuous improvement are the norms. These core values shape the University of Minnesota's vision, which is fostering a culture of safety where each member contributes. So having said that, then I think it's important to recognize that if I can move my slides here, I don't know what happened, that this definition isn't just a document. It really reflects the insights from a community of experts who provided diverse perspectives to help us assess safety initiatives across our campuses. It recognizes that the concept of safety is dynamic, multifaceted, and layered, from individual and interpersonal perspectives to community-based and organizational-based perspectives. It's really, really complex. So how do we handle all of that? And this is where we basically came as a committee and integrated the essential elements of organization, policies, solutions, communication, reporting, and education about safety. And these components are foundational to advance and assess our culture of safety. So with that, then, we can say that together, let's forge a path towards a future where safety is ingrained a feature where every community member at the University of Minnesota fosters a culture of safety. President Ettinger, senators, I invite you to consider this definition in your discussions, that it may be considered for a future endorsement. This action would be significant to strive towards a safer, more inclusive university for all. And this concludes my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will now have time for discussion. Again, Aaron can call on people. And Edgar can answer any questions.
Okay, first we have Brandy Blessed. Brandy, please go ahead.
Just on mute, Brandy, sorry.
Again, thank you for the report. I really appreciate it. I think that this culture of safety is really important at the U. I'm curious about what is the accountability structure. So if folks were to bring forth complaints or incidents where they have been targeted for harassment or anything like that, what is the infrastructure to support students or staff or faculty? And how are we going to protect those individuals so that they don't become further victimized by coming forward?
Yeah, thank you, Brady. I would like to mention that the first step that we have here is establishing the definition. The implementation of the definition has a second phase, and that really, when it comes back into taking into account what infrastructure exists, how do we actually define the processes, how do we define the procedures. The main goal right now was to try to be very comprehensive about the complexity of the issue. But definitely that's something that is going to have to be part of the second phase of the process. And I'm taking notes as well to make sure we have that in my notes.
Thank you so much.
Okay, next we have Elizabeth Boyle. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you for this report. I really appreciate the inclusiveness of the language and the way you've thought about safety in a really broad perspective. That said, though, I do have a little bit of concern that as this gets implemented with like unit safety teams and the Department of Public Safety, that some of the more law enforcement kinds of ideas will get incorporated, and some of the more inclusionary aspects will kind of get laid aside. At the very beginning of the meeting, we were talking about, how police didn't necessarily understand that it didn't make sense to ban students from campus for a year, if they're members of our community. So that's just kind of an example of how we can have sort of policies that don't make sense. And I guess you don't really need to comment right now, but I just would want to be sure that in the implementation phase that inclusivity is maintained. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I appreciate that.
Okay, and next we have Sonali Pawa. Please go ahead.
Hi, it took a minute. Thank you for that. I also have a question, much like the previous one, about the relationship of police on this campus to safety, because when I look up the Department of Public Safety, it is the University of Minnesota Police Department. So those two terms are very closely intertwined on our campus. And as you can tell by my tone, I have grave concerns about that, given what happened to our students 2 days ago, right? I mean, as President Ettinger said earlier today, we took our lead, or rather the administration took its lead from the U of M Police Department in what to do in this situation. And I cannot help but think, like the previous person who asked the question, that the use of this language of safety is going to become too closely intertwined with the language of policing. And we know that the Minneapolis Police Department has a really internationally reprehensible reputation in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonali. And I just wanted to clarify something that is part of the definition of the culture of safety. This was formed by the consultation with all the experts, stakeholders of the University of Minnesota. There were basically 10 different categories of safety that are included in that definition that try to balance that is not just police. We are not talking just about police. We are talking about all these different aspects that are important in a culture of safety definition, like cultural safety, emotional safety, inclusive safety. There are multiple aspects, and clearly in second phase, when this definition is considered, we're gonna have to make sure that we have a valuable representation of these other aspects as well to be able to address the issue that you're bringing up. Thank you.
If I could ask a very quick follow-up, I'm a cultural anthropologist by training, and I believe when you talk about a culture of something, there is always a hegemonic or a dominant definition of that culture, right? It's not ever completely inclusive. So my question was really about what it means to lead with a police-based notion of safety as per all of the language on our university platforms. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could just add, and this doesn't change the point that we probably aren't very clear about it, but we do have a university health and safety department. Catherine Bonison's in charge of that, and she reports into my office these days that's separately from Chief Clark. Previously, they both reported to the Senior Vice President office. So doesn't change the point that, okay, it may still not be very clear, or that your point that perhaps we're too oriented toward listening to police, but there is a separate group that's not just the police.
Thank you.
Joe, did you want to say something?
Yeah, absolutely. Joseph Elf, I'm a colleague of Edgar on the Campus Safety Committee. And I would like to bring special attention to, we do have a Safe Campus webpage. We do have a safety approach. We do have the President's Initiative for Student Mental Health and Misconduct and MSAFE. But then when you drive into the documentation, when you drive into it, MPACT 2025, there's a bullet point that says, we'll support essentially a culture of safety. But what we don't have, and what we do have, is a moral imperative to develop this culture of safety. We don't have that. And it's a very difficult thing to have consensus on, and it will be organic, and it will require continuous evaluation, and it will need to be right-sized as it applies to our different campuses. But what is that through line? What is that philosophical moral imperative that connects how we approach, whether it be industrial hygiene, law enforcement, classroom safety, sexual health? We don't have that. And that is a gap that we're missing that piece of our identity.
Thank you, Joe, for complimenting that. I appreciate that.
Okay, next we have Michael. Michael, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm unable to start video for some reason.
We can hear you okay.
Oh, here we go.
There you go.
All right, thanks. Yeah, so as a faculty member, we've worked on value statements for inclusive pedagogy within the department. And I think one piece that I'm seeing missing here is understanding how so something like social safety, mental safety, and emotional safety, these are issues that come up in teaching sensitive material. And part of the complexity here is that they have to be balanced against issues of academic freedom and the learning outcomes that we have to achieve, because in a cultural studies department, we have to teach controversial material and we have to negotiate that. So I'm not seeing, I know that there is some general language in the mission about the kinds of balances that this sort of safety language, involves. But, when I look at those three definitions in particular, I think is there an explanation that's explicit that shows us, okay, this has to intersect specifically with the academic mission, and that can provide challenges for safety where not all of these things can be entirely guaranteed.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michael. Absolutely, I 100% agree. I think that you are pointing to one of the most challenging aspects of basically coming up not only at the definition level, but also at the implementation level. And yeah, so there is going to have to be a lot of conversations about that, how to distinguish between what is safety and what is discomfort, for example, or what is safety and what is safetyism as well, for example. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Eric. Eric, please go ahead.
All right, I'm struggling with my video as well, Mike. So anyway, I guess one thing to maybe follow up on Mike's comment, right? There's been instances at other campuses where the notion of safety has been used to shut down events, and people thought that the concerns of safety were sort of overblown in order to shut down controversial voices. You know, that's something maybe that you've already considered in this work, but it's something I think you'd want to keep sort of at top of mind as well, that there's necessarily some balance to achieve and some care to not sort of fall on the other side, that safety isn't used as an excuse for these sorts of things. This has happened a number of times, very recently.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. We are this, as we are defining the definition, we definitely are considering these other aspects as well. Again, going back to the safetyism, if you wish, which is related to that, to shutting down events because that's discomfortable for some people. I think that's a very important point. And it's going to be important as we continue defining this definition and working with it. But again, it's going to be more in the implementation part where this becomes a very difficult issue to consider. Well, thank you for bringing this up.
Thank you.
Don't see any other comments, so thank you very much, Edgar, for that. We'll move on to item 16, which concerns next year's Senate meeting dates and was presented for information purposes. Item 17 is old business, and there was no old business available. Item 18 concerns new business for the University Senate. Please note that any new business would be referred to a committee unless special permission is granted by 2/3 of those voting and present. Is there any new business this afternoon? Yes, Pete.
I'd like to raise an issue for consideration for new business. So to make a formal motion, I guess, new identical version of this resolution was introduced and passed by the Student Senate. And for this purpose, due to insufficient time at SCC, we were it was unable to be considered there. But that said, we've completed much of the consultation process, and SCC Chair Mark B told us that the new business approach is the best possible option, and he supports this decision to bring the resolution to the University Senate here. So because this issue is time sensitive with this policy to end email for life at the start of May, or sorry, at the end of May, and this is the last University Senate meeting for the year, because there remain many significant and unaddressed issues, I move to consider the new business item a resolution on continuing Google services.
I second the motion.
Do we need to hear any further summary of it from folks, or is it at this point, do we move ahead and seek the motion for immediate consideration or vote on the motion for immediate consideration?
I've heard a motion for immediate consideration and a second for that motion. People have received the draft language both in a link from Amber earlier today and in an email earlier before this meeting. So there's no debate, and the next step is for the body to vote on whether we want to discuss this today. If it doesn't pass 2/3 support today, it will be referred to committee.
Okay, let's proceed with the vote.
A few more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. With 120 or 96 ayes and 31 nays, 76% voting in favor, that motion does carry.
Okay, the body has voted to consider this item of business immediately. I'd like to ask Senate staff to put a link to the resolution in the chat so that everyone can follow along if they didn't previously get it on the email or otherwise. Otherwise, I would ask Pete to go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I will do a brief overview of this resolution. I will share my screen. So yeah, like I said, I'll keep this brief. This initiative began in January and stemmed from SSCC frustrations about this unilateral policy change and a lack of meaningful consultation and follow-up, and also from the lack of options and alternatives for students. So I'll just I'm going to only read verbatim the resolve statement themselves, but to summarize some of the preambulatory clauses, students and organizations and other University of Minnesota community members anecdotally feel that this was a bait and switch, and or that they were deceived by this policy decision. Because many people have built their digital lives around their UMN Google account with the understanding of lifetime access. They're also very concerned about this policy change and the impact it will have on them. Significantly, there were big concerns around how few people are aware of this change today. This process involved, so researching all of these, it also involved significant research in archival UMN web pages and Wayback Machine to see how it was presented and such. One significant part from this slide is, and this is just text from the resolution itself, the preambulatory clauses. So additionally, the options for mitigating the deletion of data are quite limited, especially for students and for healthcare component accounts that have lesser access to data tools. So briefly, this was just the results of our survey we sent to all students, and also was made available to the broader University of Minnesota community. Overwhelmingly, they expressed the desire to maintain their Google Workspace. It also, this is showing some results around awareness and willingness to pay. So the first one shows that there is about a third of people before they received this survey were either completely unaware or only somewhat aware of this change. And then the second one is showing that while the university never considered this explicitly, that a lot of people would even be willing to engage in some sort of cost sharing mechanism to maintain this access. I'm not going to go through this because this is a lot of text, but if you want to take a screenshot or something and read it at your leisure, you are welcome to do so right now. But this is some of the poignant responses that we received. And sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Pete Smith. I'm a second-year medical student and the PSG rep on SSCC. So what are we asking for? So the resolve statement: resolved, the University of Minnesota University Senate demands that the University of Minnesota immediately pauses its plan to end Gmail and Google Workspace services for individuals leaving the university starting on June 1st, and implores the University of Minnesota to renegotiate with students and other parties that would be negatively impacted by this planned change through meaningful consultation and dialogue to design a plan that addresses the concerns of all parties and has the assent of representative governance, and kindly requests a prompt response due to the time-sensitive nature of this matter. So this is the full text, just to have that on the screen while we're discussing it. I hope it's not too small for folks who are on perhaps smaller screens. But that ends my presentation of the resolution.
Okay. We'll move to discussion.
Okay, first we have Alicia Cohen. Alicia is pro. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I want to commend the senators for bringing this resolution to the group. As director of the journalism school, I recently reached out to the director of the School of Music and was thinking about this with the College of Design and others who might be similarly affected. My unit employs many part-time and temporary employees who will be impacted by this. I received a list of between 60 and 100 people who might no longer have Gmail access after, I believe, 20 to 30 days because of the new policy. I might be charged $2,000 to $3,000 a person, not me personally, our unit.
It's unclear what the implementation will be for us to extend email accounts. And as far as I can tell, none of our units that have employees in this job code who teach students, who work closely with students, who students need for recommendations, who share information, who we encourage to use Gmail accounts to maintain student data privacy and for other reasons rather than the part-time employees' professional accounts. None of us were consulted in this process. I do think it's hasty. I'm personally concerned that this could cost the school $50,000 to $100,000 extra dollars next year without even really knowing how to implement this well. And just to be honest, it was implemented so quickly that we haven't even really gotten our head around this. So I do agree that it would be very supportive both for students, our contact with alumni in the future, our part-time employees and our retirees who might be impacted, to slow this down and to have wider consultation on the policy. I think that the data privacy, the data sharing, and the academic reasons for extending accounts for a period of time and the precise time frame for those dates really need more academic involvement from faculty, from academic leaders who work with affected employees than what I've seen so far. And I've only started making inquiries just because it's so overwhelming to get my head fully around this. So I really appreciate the resolution and support it.
Okay, next we have Scott Creer. Scott is con. Scott, please go ahead.
So I put con, it forced into a binary, but my concerns stem from what the budgetary impact is for this request. We don't know, so we should probably ask that question before we make any decision as a body on whether or not we should ask for that, because again, any additional services we request, there's got to be money to pay for it. And so the question is, do you willing to support tuition increases to support this service? And if so, I would like to hear that from the student body. If they would like to say, yes, we do support tuition increases to if that was be required to support these services. And so that would be informative to better understand before voting on something like this.
If I could just briefly respond to that. When we reached out about that specifically, we did not get a response. There are published information out there from Google on what that would cost. My understanding is that the cost was actually a secondary concern. But I do think that it's important to recognize that in this resolution, we're not asking for an unlimited continuation. We're just asking for a pause and to renegotiate what this may look like to prevent significant data loss and problems for individuals. So, but thank you for your comment.
The other item I would say, because I think I still do have time left, is that the train's left the station on this, so we're already communicating about this to alumni. We're already working through the process. And so to pause now would require a significant amount of staff support to just pause it and then redo communications. And I would say this change was communicated well in advance. I believe it was communicated almost a year ago now. And so to bring it up now in this stage also is a bit of an issue.
I just want to say that my name is Kelly Greaves and I'm here representing OIT, so I can answer some questions as they come up, but want to respect the process. So I don't know when you want me to step in.
I mean, I think again, like we were earlier, we're probably in a mode where, well, I mean, you're voting on this, so maybe we can't wait on it. I was going to say if we would want to hear the questioners, but.
Yeah, just to be mindful of time, I know that we have, provided my math still works, about 6 minutes left on this topic. So it seems like based on last time that we would go through the questions so that you can hear the feedback. If anybody would like to handle it differently, I'm open to that. Okay. Hearing none, Taiwo, why don't you please go ahead? Taiwo is pro.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak. After we had this conversation about this with OIT at the SSCC, I took the initiative of consulting with College of Pharmacy students, and over 90% of students there want to continue to have access to their Google services. Besides, the Health Science Student Consultative Committee overwhelmingly voted to also approve this resolution. So as an individual, I'm not, I try to put aside my sentiment or biases and go with what my constituents want. What's really gonna, favor everyone. And so if my constituent want this to stay, then I would request that everyone support that motion. However, Pete, I got feedback from COGS, and I would want to ask if you'll be open to amending item number 2, which says employs the University of Minnesota to renegotiate with students. Instead of saying renegotiate, can we say negotiate? Because a lot of students feel we never had any negotiation about this before. So saying renegotiation means that we've had a conversation before anything happened.
Thank you, Tao. I think we no longer have the ability to do friendly amendments. So while I appreciate the sentiment and I agree with the sentiment, I think that would perhaps bog things down at this point. But
You actually
You actually do still have the ability to accept friendly amendments. There is a discussion ongoing about changing some of those rules, but none of that discussion has been completed yet.
Gotcha. Thank you for the clarification. Yes. Okay. I would accept that then to change that specific word to strike the and renegotiate and yeah. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Sarah Buchanan. Sarah is pro. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you again for the opportunity to talk. I also really think this is an important issue. One point that is not highlighted in this resolution, and this is also a friendly amendment, would be that this taking away these email accounts is a great hindrance to faculty in their jobs, in the sense that part of what I do here on the Morris campus is reach out to alumni for various reasons. And when their emails disappear, I can no longer contact them. And sometimes because of FERPA laws, I can't get hold of their new email addresses through our alumni association board. So this will now create a barrier where I am no longer able to contact my alumni for various, to invite them back to campus or to talk to our students or whatever the case may be. So I was hoping that maybe we could add that as another reason why this is a bad initiative. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Carolyn Liebler. Carolyn is also pro. Please go ahead.
Thank you for bringing this up. This is a very important issue. I wanted to say 2 things. One was agreeing with Sarah Buchanan. I teach a capstone class where I constantly am contacting alumni, and I completely rely on their U of M emails to do that. Secondly, I think there's a unique situation of retired professors because we've worked here for often decades at a time, and so our entire work life is inside of this email history, and it feels like that is even more urgent than some of the other like perhaps an undergraduate who's been here for 4 years versus a professor who's been here for 30 years might be weighted differently. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Jerry Cohen. Jerry is pro. Please go ahead.
Yes, I'm Jerry Cohen from Department of Horticultural Science. This entire IT limiting thing is not academically sound. I expressed that in the workshop that IT ran, which I found insulting. The whole thing stifles communication in science by orphaning graduate students and postdoc emails, limiting archival retrieval of published science, restricting needlessly contacts with published authors, and increases the communication burden on faculty. There are some things an R1 university needs to do, and providing post-residence communication is one of those. These changes will disrupt commitments I have made in my ongoing grants in terms of broader impact activities, as well as individual mentoring plans that we have in place. my read on funding of this is that under uniform guidance, telecommunication costs are included within indirect cost recovery, which means that I'm already paying for this. And that you're removing things that I paid for from the people who I support. I think that that whole process has gone poorly in terms of the academic community. In all of my interactions with IT on this, they have been obstinate. They haven't listened to it and into any arguments, and they've been very difficult in this whole process. And so I think that this resolution is timely, and I think it is actually an elevation of our academic excellence by having it take place. Thank you.
Okay, next we have, I had mentioned in the chat that it's Charles Rank is last, but I think Jessica and Charles kind of switched spots in my on my screen. So I'll call on Charles and then Jessica. So Charles is pro, so please go ahead.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, and again, I'm from the Civil Service Senate. I think I'm pro. I don't know. I work with private employee information, so I'm resigned to the fact that I'll lose my email after I leave anyway. But I'm also very cybersecurity minded. I wanted to try to yield to Kelly to see if she had any background. It seemed like she had possibly some perspective from OIT on how this would affect. So I would like to yield time to her if she would like to speak.
I'd gladly like to speak. So as Pete mentioned, the real driver behind this initiative is information security. And so the VP-CIO Galacek has been charged with improving access at the university, right? And reducing our risk to information security in terms of data privacy, and in terms of all of our data that's stored in university systems. And so to put it in simple terms, email is the start of about 90% of all cybersecurity attacks. And by reducing the number of emails that the university has intertwined in our systems, we're reducing the risk to our student data, to our health data, to our social security numbers, right? To all of the private data that the university has. And I will also say that we did communicate this back in March of 2023, and we've been working really hard to talk with individual units to hear what your concerns are. And we are absolutely open to having conversations with all folks who have concerns about your adjuncts. That's really more of an HR kind of issue and not an IT issue, but we're happy to connect you with folks. And so yes. I want to say again that this is really about information security and about protecting our systems and our data.
Okay, so Pete has asked to respond to Kelly, and then we will go to Jessica.
Yeah, so I would just say, and I do definitely appreciate the concern about data security. I would, however, say that it seems that there's a bigger issue at play of how we're managing and storing our data rather than, and then that's a more significant issue than having more accounts on. I think it was cited something like only 3% or so of people continue to use their Google accounts like long after they're graduated. But those 3% of people like have significant needs and they use their accounts significantly. I was going to say about cost, I think that the harm done that through the deletion of files and loss of collaborative access is going to be significantly, and the higher IT burden that this will cause is going to be significantly higher, especially in the short term, than the higher cost. So yeah, I guess just to summarize, just like I know that and then the consultation process. I think that, you know, it's one thing to have conversations with folks and hear their concerns. But I just wish that there would have been some more like dialogue and engagement and you know, addressing our concerns more head on in this process. And that's I think what has led to this. So
if I could, nobody is going to lose data as a result of this except through inaction, right? There are tools that people can use to migrate their emails or download them in the case of the healthcare component. And I'd also like to say that you can download your emails, yes. So in any case, the decision about restricting the healthcare component doesn't belong to IT. I would encourage you to have a conversation with the Health Information and Privacy Compliance Office. They are the ones who set the terms for healthcare component access. And that's to be compliant with HIPAA. And so the Office of Information Technology is the operational side of that, but we are not the decision-making body for that.
Right. I'm not sure as far as procedure how this should go, but just to address a couple of things there. The tools available, those tools are not available to students for shared drives. Organizational documents will be deleted. We're especially concerned about things like constitutions and things that are owned by other accounts. And there's no workable solution to mass change ownership of documents. But
student organizations can request a staff member to create a shared drive for them and have that moved in. And we did discuss that, Pete.
Okay, we have one last question. Jessica Johnson is also pro. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the recognition. I'm also having trouble with my video. I am Jessica Johnson. I'm a faculty member in the physical therapy program in the medical school. And I am very concerned about this. We have graduate students, we have clinical instructors, we have adjuncts, we have so many people that are involved with this. And this, I think, actually goes back to an earlier discussion that we were having about an overreaction to safety that is going far beyond what the actual risk may be, that we're losing so much connectivity, so much collaboration, so much access, and value to our students and our community that we are a part of for a risk that I understand is real. But I think we have been doing some things lately at this university that have been overemphasizing this feeling of safety over and beyond any academic excellence, scientific discovery, connectivity, and collaboration. And I'm very concerned that we are losing really important tools in a reactionary way to some data breaches that had happened, that I feel that this is very much overstepping, and the things that we will lose and will be unable to retrieve by making this step feel really important for us to have this pause. Whether or not the decision is made in the future, this feels like it needs space and time to be able to negotiate this conversation. Thank you for the time.
So if I may again, so
Kelly, just as a reminder that you need to ask for your time to be recognized by a senator who will yield their time. Charles, please go ahead.
Oh, I will just yield my time to Kelly if she wanted to say anything.
Okay, go ahead, Kelly. Thank you.
I would like to reemphasize that no data will be lost as long as people move them into a shared drive, and also that that we're working with folks to raise awareness so nobody loses anything. There is also going to be, after an account is closed, 6 months before anything is deleted. So at least 6 months before anything is deleted. And we are working really closely with folks so that we can make sure that there is awareness, that there's proper offboarding when graduate students leave. And again, to Pete's point, it is a very small percentage of folks who keep their email after they leave the university. So for most folks, this is just part of the transition as they leave. This is more of a formalizing of that transition, and we're providing lots of support for people. We're supporting people as they're transferring their data, as they're setting up new accounts and providing guidance. So as I say, like this is smaller, a smaller impact than maybe is being felt right now. But it's specifically for people who retire or graduate with a degree that retained access before. And again, a small amount of those even wanted to keep their Google accounts. Those who do, we want to provide transition tools. We want to provide support and communication. So thank you.
We need to move to the vote. I would ask Pete if he has a formal motion.
Yeah, I move to vote on this resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Please proceed to poll.
A few more seconds if you wish to vote. And sorry, I can see that it's not on the screen, but hopefully you all have it up on your own screens. And last call. With 89 ayes and 29 nays, this motion carries.
Okay. Is there any other new business? Seeing none, is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
And just recall the Twin Cities folks to stay on, please, after this. But go ahead with the poll.
All right, last call. 116 ayes, we are adjourned.
Thank you. I believe Jen Goodnow has offered to chair this next meeting. I greatly appreciate that. I will bid adieu.
Thank you. As President Ettinger indicated, I am Jennifer Goodnow. I am here because I am the Vice Chair of the Senate Consultative Committee, and for the Constitution, Bylaws, Wonks, that puts me next in line to chair this. Good afternoon. I will now call this meeting of the Twin Cities delegation of the University Senate to order. And given that it was slated for 25 minutes, we will in fact offer all 25 minutes to our upcoming presenter. Item 2 concerns recommendations of the Core Curriculum 2025 Committee, and it is on the agenda for discussion. Professor Will DeFree will present this item, and so I turn the floor over to Will. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. And before I begin, I'm going to, Provost Croson wanted to make a couple of comments.
Great. Thank you, Professor Durfee, and thank you all for being willing to stay late to consider this very important topic. As many of you know, before I arrived in March 2020, there had been, I think, a 3-year process to revise the core curriculum that did not ultimately get enacted. And when I arrived in fall, of course, 2020, we were busy with other things. But I did feel very strongly, both in talking to the previous provost and in talking to others in higher education, that one needs to revise core curricula as the world changes, and that it had been a very long time for us, and that we had the opportunity to develop something that was new and innovative and really met the needs of our students and the interests of our students where they are. And so we formed this broad-based committee. Professor Durfee, a former FCC chair, graciously agreed to chair the committee. The committee has been consulting quite broadly for 2 years, including many university governance, but also lots of student groups. And I especially want to thank them for all of their work and their leadership. I also want to just frame this discussion because I know there's always concerns when you change a core curriculum about what are the impacts of that on a specific unit. And what I want to highlight is how important it is for that where everyone's naturally concerned about their own discipline and their own college. When we're having these discussions, we really need to take the perspective of the university as a whole and our students as a whole and what will be best for them, rather than simply thinking about what's going to be best for my particular unit. I know the committee has done this, and I'm very grateful for that, and I urge the senators to do that as well. The final thing I will just mention, because it's included in the docket, is there are some financial resources kind of aimed at facilitating this transition to a new curriculum if it were indeed to pass whenever we have the final vote on it. So with that, I'll stop and I will turn it over to Professor Durfee to describe the details.
Okay, thank you, Provost Croson. So we're not going to take a really long time to introduce this because our time is short, and I do appreciate everyone staying at this hour of the day. As was mentioned, I'm Will Durfee. I am from CSE and part of this committee, chairing this committee, and also from the committee with us today is Leanne Broach from CLA, Catherine Pearson from CLA, and Sarah Davis, undergraduate student class of 2025, CEHD and CLA, and also the undergraduate student government president. So I've got a grand total of 3 slides for you, and Amber kindly put these slides into the agenda just maybe 15 minutes ago. So there's more slides that you could take a look at, but nothing in the slides is anything different than you've seen in the report that you got. So we were, as Provost Croson said, chartered 2 years ago by the Provost and the Senate Committee on Educational Policy to examine the general education requirements at the University of Minnesota and to recommend possible changes. And the report that you all got is a draft of a proposal, and I emphasize the word draft because the point of being here is for to listen to all of you so that the revision of the draft can reflect multiple opinions. So let me just say first, kind of the why, and really I think the most important why is that students are seeking to connect their education to their world that they're going to be in post graduation, and not just their major, but also the other major component of their university education, which is the general education. So students really want to be that change agent and to participate in understanding complex challenges facing the world today. This is reflected in that Boyer 2030 report, which many of you have read, but it really, asks if our students are getting a transformative educational experience that provides some orientation to the world that is their inheritance. So this is a slide that I'm going to spend just a bit of time on to explain the proposed general education curriculum that's tentatively being titled the core curriculum. So it's got it's got 4 major components. In the middle in the gold are the foundations, and you can think about these if you want as being analogous to a replacement of our current diversified core. So there are 6 of them, and you can see the titles of them, but students would take 1 course in each foundation, and the intention here is to provide the students with that disciplinary breadth that is required for a liberal education. The second component, which is new, and this is the focus areas that you'll see over on the left. And the intent here is that a student takes 3 courses that connect to a focus area. The conceptual idea is that by viewing a particular focus, which is related to a societally significant problem, plus one that's interesting to the student, viewing it from 3 different lenses, that student is able to comprehend in a broad-based way that particular issue or area, and which is why they're called focus areas. So we have 4 very broadly around the themes of equity, environment, civic life, and well-being. Then down at the bottom, below the gold ones, you'll see race, power, and justice in the United States. This remains unchanged from what we have now. Then below that, you'll see the writing requirement where a change is being recommended from the current requirements that we have to keep that 4 writing intensive course requirement, but to have one of those 4 be first year writing, 2 of them be upper division in the major, and then the third one be the synthesis course that I'm about to describe. The last component that I'll describe are the 2 things at either end, and they're tied to this concept of the focus area. So the first one, that first year exploration, would be a 1 credit course, which as envisioned in the proposal, sits separate from the first year experiences within the colleges, because this is intended to be a university-wide experience that brings together students from across the university. But this course enables the students to learn about the purpose of a broad-based education, introduce the focus areas, and provides a pathway for the student to select a focus area, although they don't necessarily have to have it selected, right away at the end of that course, but rather provides them a pathway to select it. Then finally, at the right-hand side, you'll see the synthesis course. This is proposed as a 3 credit course. And this is one where students are able to bring together the different perspectives that they've learned about the focus area and to put it together and to synthesize it into some kind of a show what you know product, which could be a traditional report, or it could be a video, or it could be a performance. There's a whole variety of different ways that one might be able to communicate what the students have learned about this particular focus area, this particular societally significant problem. And also there may be an opportunity in that for it to be done in groups, so that a student who's majoring in philosophy can connect with a student who's majoring in finance and connect with a student who's majoring in horticulture, and maybe the 3 of them can get together on this output product. So the big kind of the difference between what we have now really is in this focus area, this idea of connecting a societally significant problem, having students be able to connect their education to that and to have some choice in doing that. So I'm going to stop there. There's a lot of other details in it, but I did want to turn it over to Sarah Davis, who could just talk maybe just for a couple of minutes from the student perspective about this before we open this up for comments. So Sarah?
Thank you, Will. I appreciate it. And for you all taking the time to be here on so late in the evening to hear our proposal. But it was my honor this year to sit on the core curriculum committee and talk about what these changes look like for students and how they can impact our own liberal education. The committee has been really great because I've been kind of bringing student feedback back and forth, especially when we were speaking about writing intensives and what that looks like for students and how we can best prepare students coming in, maybe with different credit loads, and what that looks like coming in from high school or as a PSEO student when, you might be more prepared to do writing, but not at a college level or in a discipline-specific area, and how to navigate that throughout this process, which has been a really good and interesting time for me to do all of this discussion. We've also had folks come and present at our forum and hear from students, especially, and how students who have specific majors or are in specific fields or who are double majors and double degrees or with different minors and really provided some guidance on how students would feel about navigating in their field in alignment with this current core curriculum committee proposal. So I have felt confident throughout this process that there's been student voices integrated into this. And also I wanted to touch on, you know, most of the student reactions that I've heard have been really questions based and asking just, oh, well, what about this? And for my situation, how does that work with this? And so it's been a really interesting point for me to sit on the committee and talk about those pieces of discussion. But with that, I also am wanting to know that I'm open to questions as well. So if folks have questions for me as a student, I'm happy to answer those as we continue. So thank you, Will. I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So as you know, we released the report last week and got wonderful comments and suggestions, and those are continuing, and it's all part of the process for determining how to make this revision more reflective of where we want to be as a university. The comments fall roughly into 5 categories. A lot of suggestions and ideas around the titles and definitions of the categories, both the foundations and the focus areas. Questions and comments about the logistics of those 2 centrally managed courses. Those are the ones at either end. A lot of ideas about that. Questions about the number of minimum credits in our general education program. Many questions, of course, about the impact on college and department course enrollments and budgets. And then finally, some questions about the entire conceptual framework, because when you really think about it, it's this sense of does picking a single focus area and examining it through 3 different lenses broaden or narrow a student's exposure to the broad concept of a liberal education compared to what we have now, which is requiring our student to take 3 or 4 themes. You know, and there's been a bunch of other, questions and comments, but sort of largely those are the ones that people really have been providing their ideas. So this is a draft that you have, and now it's going to essentially hopefully turn over a listening session, and we're going to try not to answer any questions unless there's a point of order or really, something else. But I'll turn it back over to you, Jennifer, to moderate the discussion.
Thank you so much, Professor Durfee, for this. And also I appreciate the students' perspective being shared. I think that's helpful. At this time, it'll be open for discussion, and I would ask Aaron to call on people as they raise their hands. As this is for discussion, not a vote, there's no need to do pro or con. And so Aaron, if we have hands up, please feel free to begin calling on them.
My screen kept moving to unmute myself. So the first one is Elizabeth Boyle. Elizabeth, please go ahead.
Thank you. I want to thank the committee. I can tell that this was a lot of work, and I know you're getting a lot of critiques right now, but I do appreciate that this is a draft, and really happy that you're open to comments. And I think it's wonderful that you've provided this strong foundation that we can respond to. So I think my comment really falls into the first bucket that Professor Durfee mentioned, and that is about the content. I feel like it's a mistake to drop global perspectives entirely. I think that's a little bit like teaching astronomy and making the Earth the center of the universe. Students really need a global perspective to understand what they're experiencing, and also to see how that fits into a broader context. I just want to give you 3 really quick reasons. I could give you dozens more, but just to focus on 3. One is understanding American exceptionalism. So the United States is just such a unique country in positive and negative ways. Students don't necessarily appreciate that there's, for example, something out there, there's a treaty out there in the world that supports the rights of children, and the United States is the only country in the world that hasn't signed on to that. They don't understand that we have a very unique thing called gun culture here that other countries just don't even understand. Our system of freedom of speech is very unique. So there's just lots of ways in which the United States is unique, and a global perspective helps with that. The second thing is that having a global perspective is a wonderful source of innovation. Looking at our healthcare system and our health insurance system, the students in my global health class are just amazed when they hear how other countries handle healthcare and how it just makes so much more sense. But they have no exposure to that outside of a global perspectives class. And then finally, appreciating how each one of us is connected to others around the world, right? So this thing right here, it didn't just drop like manna from heaven into the Apple Store. You know, this was
30 seconds remaining.
Thank you. This has many different component parts that are connected to people all around the world. People who are collecting cobalt in third world countries, people in China who are doing the manufacturing, sometimes with dangerous chemicals, well-to-do people in the United States who are kind of like coming up with a technical interface. And so when students are buying things or when they're acting in the world, they're constantly impacting other people around the world, and without a global perspective, I'm afraid they won't understand that. So that's my comment. Thank you.
And apologies, I forgot to do the 2 reminders to please have people introduce themselves. And if you are not a senator, make sure you, that someone yields time to you. So apologies for that.
Okay, next we have Ellen Messer-Davidow. Please go ahead.
Ellen Messer-Davidow, Department of English. And I second Liz on appreciating the work that the committee did. It was huge. My concern is a huge structural problem. The core curriculum plan has organizing principles, number of courses, topics and themes, course goals, course contents, pedagogies. Those are different from the organizing principles of disciplines. Disciplines have periods, have objects of inquiry, different objects of inquiry, principles, genres, individual and system levels, language, theories, and analytical methods. I see those 2 schemes as fairly incompatible. When I try to think of how English or any other language and literature department or cultural studies or, you know, name your department, how would they institutionalize this if they wanted a number of courses to be considered as core curriculum? I'm at a loss to explain that. So what I would like to see with this proposal is a temporary pause, go back to departments, ask them, how would you institutionalize this if you wanted to have a number of core curriculum courses approved? Students are going to follow these pathways. So
30 seconds remaining.
So as they follow the pathways, is that going to harm particular departments and disciplines? Is it going to help them? Can particular departments even institutionalize this scheme? So I think that has to happen before the project goes further.
Okay, next we have Eric Van Wyck. Eric, please go ahead. You are indeed a senator.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I asked this question in the chat since I'm chair of the AF&T, and that's not technically a senator in a sense. Anyway, so my question is, or my concern is, comes from page 37 of the report. There's some comments about the first year in the synthesis courses, that they're coordinated by a sort of central office, and it goes on to say these courses will have common syllabi overseen by CLE, that's the Council on Liberal Education. This seems like an actual violation of academic freedom. So the committee AF&T wrote a statement back in May of 2022 about large multi-section courses and the academic freedom that instructors in those courses enjoy. And so certainly being able to write one's own syllabus is a key part of that academic freedom, right? In establishing courses like this, we can certainly, you know, identify the core content, the learning objectives, all these sort of shared objectives that people need to adhere to or adhere to in teaching those. But going so far as to say they need to have the same syllabus is really a pretty dramatic step over the line there. That one's very clear cut to me. I have a concern about these sort of being coordinated by a central office. You know, how faculty driven that is I'm unclear about, but certainly the curriculum lies within the hands of the faculty. And so that's something I'd like to learn more about at some point, but those are my concerns and comments. So thank you.
Okay, next we have Ava Von Dassau. Ava, please go ahead and identify yourself and proceed.
Ava Von Dassau, CLA faculty. I would like to ask Shir Ganor to yield me time.
I yield time to Eva.
Thank you. To start with, whatever other consultation has been done lately, this is the first occasion on which faculty as a body have been allowed to comment on this new proposal. Few of us have any love for the current burdensome system of lib ed requirements, which is paraded as a core curriculum, but is at best a labor-intensive curricular smorgasbord. But if we're to put a lot more labor into a new system, it had better be worth our while. What we are presented with here is not. The proponents claim that students have changed, the world has changed, therefore our lib ed requirements must also change. This flawed logic is based on false premises. First, that we've all been teaching the same thing without change for 20 years. And second, that all the subjects we teach have somehow become obsolete. When did it cease being necessary to acquire some knowledge of, say, chemistry or statistics or philosophy? Yet, notwithstanding that the word discipline is sprinkled throughout the text of this proposal, the proposed framework wholly divorces required courses from actual disciplines. Students come to a research university because it makes a promise other lower tier institutions cannot make, that here they will study biology with biologists, history with historians, Chinese literature with specialists in that field, and so on, from anthropology to zoology. To dilute all these into incoherent puddles like interpretive inquiry is a betrayal of that promise. Nothing
30 seconds remaining.
How this proposal devalues our disciplines better than the creative expression requirement. To meet it, one course would have to equip all students to produce original work within 14 weeks. People study music, dance, and theater for years in order to be able to produce original work that's worth performing. To demand that they teach undergraduates to do it in one semester makes a mockery of their disciplines. And so it goes with every subject we teach, every discipline. They're all to be shrunk to the size of a single course, then diluted among similarly shrunken subjects into an optional 3-credit curricular vitamin.
Sorry, time is up.
I hope we'll have more opportunities to discuss something this important.
Okay, next we have Michael. Michael, please go ahead. You are recognized.
Hi, I'm trying to get my video started here. Here we go. Hi, I'm Michael Galope, CLA, Chair of Cultural Studies and Comparative Literature. I've been teaching LE for 10 years. I love teaching LE. I love talking about LE. And Will knows this, we've talked about it a lot. This proposal to me, you can't really impose LE on a top-down way. The faculty have to really be excited to teach it, because if there's no investment, the quality of the pedagogy won't be there. And I think that's also for students. And so I'm seeing a lot of disconnects in this particular proposal between where our tenure lines are in the university, across departments, especially in CLA, and where these various, first of all, the foundations are. And that makes me worried about adjunctification. So just one example, creative expression. I'm a musician, I love creative expression. We don't have the capacity to teach, 8,000 students a year how to make original work. It doesn't scale to large lecture instruction in the way that humanities and a literature course does. So that's going to be a big personnel problem. We don't want to move towards adjunctification. So I think we have a lot of misalignments that we have to sort of sort through here. I think the launch seminar and the synthesis seminar are quite problematic. As a chair, I have a very hard time seeing how I can convince anyone to want to teach such a standardized course. 37 sections, 200 students each. Will seniors really want to be in a large lecture class?
30 seconds remaining.
There's another issue related to the narrowness of the focus areas. I think it's I'm one of the people that feels like to pick just wellness for your whole career is contrary to what LE is. Lastly, credit count. We have accreditation issues. This is only 27 credits. HLC requires 30 credits. So we do need to sort that out and figure out if this is going to put our accreditation at risk as an institution. Thanks.
Okay, next we have Akasua Edo, please go ahead.
I come to you from the School of Music. I'm a senator, and my fellow senator, Dean Sorensen, serves on the executive committee for the School of Music, and they discussed this proposal in the executive committee meeting on Tuesday. And so I'm giving you a feedback from the School of Music. The reactions to it was mixed to negative, to say the least. Of particular concern was the first-year exploration and synthesis courses that would be required and who would teach these classes. Also of concern was the newly proposed Creative Expressions Foundations, which requires students to propose their own original works for us in music. This would potentially mean very large classes engaging in composition activities, and we do not know where the support will come from or for this. The arts department also has expressed similar concerns. On a broad scale, since we are discussing the support for teaching, it is not clear where many of these courses, the aforementioned exploration and synthesis courses, will be housed. Many of them will be housed in the central administration instead of CLA or other colleges, thus removing the potential tuition revenue from the colleges or units. The administrative cost of ramping up such a change like this would be enormous. And once it's up and going, it would still require increased administration compared to the LE system currently in place. Does this new proposal offer enough benefit to justify those increased costs? The general consensus is no.
30 seconds remaining.
I also like to add my voice to Elizabeth Boyle's concern for global studies. That's my concern too. Thank you. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, next we have Alicia Cohen. Alicia, please go ahead.
Unable to start video. Thanks. I wanted to echo to forward a unique concern around workforce. I'm really concerned given Mark B's and others' report and all the time and energy put into LE conversations that it not fail again, and that we have a consensus change, or at least a change that we feel is clear and comparable. And what I would really encourage the committee to do in the months ahead is to take the time to map the current LE courses, approved courses, onto whatever iteration of next LE is, and to spend time doing some of that work to show that this is a workforce manageable reform. You've heard the 1 credit hour concerns and the kind of concerns that we have a mismatch between some of these different areas of competencies with where our tenure-line faculty are. In the College of Liberal Arts, I think we have over 100 faculty, I've learned, that teach literature-related courses. So where does literature fit in? Where is our capacity? Where do we have oversupply and undersupply of faculty, to use a real blunt or crass comment? And how does this map on? It's not that we can't change, but given the morale and workforce issues, I do think we need to pay attention to it. I recommend that we really slow down and be consultative. I was here when the last LE reform work took a lot of time, energy, and failed. I remember that meeting in the law school, and it was largely over some of these, I call them implementation concerns, but it wasn't really implementation as much as it was a feasibility, and what is it that we're achieving here that's better than what we have? And that hasn't been fully articulated with this round. Last, I do have
30 seconds remaining.
HLC requirement, and I just want to read it into the record so everyone understands it. It's, quote, "The institution maintains a minimum requirement for general education for all of its undergraduate programs, whether through a traditional practice of distributed credit hours," and that's 30 for bachelor's degrees, or through integrated, embedded, interdisciplinary, or other models that demonstrate a minimum required equivalent. All of the Big Ten have at least 30 credit hours. We probably need to pursue that, and that's something that the committee needs to fix before it comes back to the Senate, in my opinion.
Okay, and our last speaker is Aaron Winveen. Please go ahead.
Hello, yeah, I'm Aaron Winding from the physics department. I first want to echo, what Ava and Michael said. I mean, a number of this, or especially what Ava said, it seems like it's a kind of a potpourri of courses. But I also want to kind of turn to practical matters. For science and engineering students, fitting all these different courses in, I think it's going to be much of a burden on them. I know they said the credit load will stay the same, but, I think the students will have to be, know exactly what they need to take every semester, from the get-go. And I advise a lot of students and, things are changing. So I'm worried that it's going to delay graduation. They'll have to take more. Also, a practical matter. So the number of labs required has changed. It's to one lab now, one lab course, and it's requiring labs every week. And we can't necessarily do that. We have enrollments going up in CSE, 20%. We don't have the rooms. We don't have the space or the resources to handle this. So we're going to a model where labs do not meet every week. So I just hope that, we can be flexible here with regards to, what's required of a lab course or any courses. I'm finished. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate all the engagement, and I realize there was probably a desire for more, but the 25-minute time limit stands. And so I suspect that Professor Durfee would welcome emails to himself or other committee members with additional feedback. And I know that they're going to continue to integrate the feedback that they're hearing to this. So thank you. Item 3 is old business. There is no old business. Item 4 concerns new business for the Twin Cities delegation. Please note that any new business will be referred to committee unless special permission is granted by 2/3 of those voting and present. Is there any new business? Seems like a long enough pause. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Amber, please initiate the poll.
Couple more seconds. And last call. Unanimously approved.
Thank you. We are adjourned.